produced and presented by me, John Murphy, with additional production help in Ivory Coast from Ibrahim Brou.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. We are out and about. We've got a community studio set up this morning. We've been invited into the Elm Cafe and Pizzeria. They start serving breakfast at 7. We are in the riding of Elmwood-Transcona, and that's because there's a by-election here coming up next week. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on Scene. So you're with CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube this morning. Thank you so much for joining us at 3 minutes to 6 o'clock. I can tell you that it's 16 degrees in Winnipeg, and our drive over here was pretty quiet and calm. It's going to clear this morning, a high today of 29 with Humidex 34. If you need to reach us on the commute, I always like to remind you, 788-3093. We've got a busy show ahead. I would like to thank Elman Montoya for having us here, and Myra DeBoon. We're just really grateful to have our community studio set up. The candidates are going to be coming here. We've secured 5 of 6 of them to be on our program today to talk to you, voters in Elmwood-Transcona, about why they should represent you federally should they win this by-election. They want your votes. We're also going to hear about some of the issues in the neighborhood. We spent some time here this week hearing all kinds of things from people. The growing diversity, huge riding, the different needs in housing here in Elmwood. People saying it's more about folks that are vulnerable and unhoused. In Transcona, people saying they're having challenges with paying rent and all kinds of other things in between. We're also going to hear a bit about why this is a fantastic place to live. So this is our live remote from Elmwood-Transcona, and thank you for joining us. Let's say good morning to the team. The fabulous Chloe Friesen on site with me, Abby Adeyemi and May McKillop and Kevin Ipatebo are back at our studios at CBC, and so is Heather Wells. Here she is with our day's news headlines.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's plan to offer $40 million in subsidies to redevelop Portage Place Mall has elicited a range of reactions. The mayor is in support. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is skeptical. And a Winnipeg man who works in an office inside that downtown mall says he is just eager to see it improved. We'll hear more about that. And people forced to flee a growing wildfire near Bonabonabee Cree Nation earlier this summer have now returned home. Those stories and more coming up in our first local newscast at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, in the first hour of the show, we're going to meet someone who works at the ground floor of needs and with community. And she says that they had to cut one of their transportation programs to get people to get groceries in this community because they don't have enough sustainable funding. What will the Green Party and the Future Party of Canada say about that? We'll find out.
On Q.
I'm Talia Schlenger sitting in for Tom Power. There's a new Tragically Hip documentary that chronicles the band's rise from early days playing in bars to filling stadiums in Canada. You'll hear from filmmaker Mike Downey and members of the band about never-seen-before footage.
There was anger and frustration and resentment, and then Gord got his diagnosis.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. The threat of an Air Canada pilot strike is causing concern on the East Coast. The deadline to reach a deal is still days away, but in Newfoundland and Labrador, it is already having an impact. Peter Cowan reports.
If you want to get to the island of Newfoundland, usually you have to take a flight, and more often than not, that means Air Canada. The airline flies more passengers in and out of St. John's than all the other airlines put together. Laurie Best just flew in from Alberta. She's here to visit family, but already anxious about getting home.
It's quite worrisome because I'm here and how will I get back? It's a little far to walk.
She's not alone. Some travelers are calling hotels and tour companies to cancel rather than risk being stuck. Air Canada's pilots could go on strike just after midnight on September 18th. But the airline warns flights could be disrupted as early as the weekend. Steve Crocker is Newfoundland and Labrador's tourism minister. He says even a short disruption could have a big impact.
Quite frankly, it's already being impacted by this. We've lost bookings. We hear from operators now, pretty much hourly that people are canceling, the uncertainty.
I travel every single week for work.
Then there are the business travelers like Nicole Neary. She's a software consultant who lives outside St. John's but visits clients all over North America.
Next week I'm supposed to be in Trinidad, and it's something that's been booked for a long time, and it would cause a lot of issues to reschedule. I mean, that's a big trip.
Her hope Air Canada makes a deal with its pilots so travel for her and hundreds of thousands like her isn't disrupted. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
In northern Gaza, the Palestinian news agency Wafa is reporting Israel's military has launched more airstrikes at displacement camps. It comes amid international condemnation of yesterday's attack on a central Gaza school. It was being used to shelter 12,000 displaced Palestinians. Sasha Petrusik is in Jerusalem with that reaction.
Survivors sift through the shattered school, pulling out broken bicycles, shoes and toys as Lubna Genwa recounts the double airstrike that hit her shelter. We woke up with rubble on top of us, she says. When we went downstairs, many dead and in bad shape. The injured were rushed to hospital in central Gaza. Health officials say at least 18 people died in Wednesday's attack on the school, operated as a crowded refugee center by UNRWA. That's the UN's main agency helping Palestinians. And UN officials say 6 of its aid workers are among the dead, the highest number in any single strike. Israel says it was targeting a Hamas control center operating among civilians.
What's happening in Gaza is totally unacceptable.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres blames both sides for Gaza's high casualties.
Very dramatic violations of international humanitarian law and the total absence of an effective protection of civilians.
This is the 5th time this school has been targeted by Israel as its military operations continue throughout Gaza. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
We all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
And that was the moment when billionaire Jared Isaacman popped out of his space capsule and into space. He is part of the SpaceX Polaris Dawn crew attempting the first civilian privately funded spacewalk right now. SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis is with him. My co-host John Northcott is with me here covering this story. John, what is happening up there?
Marcia, it's called an EVA, extravehicular activity. 4 astronauts on board the SpaceX vehicle, 2 of them actually leaving it and walking in space. But since the Dragon has no airlocks, all of them will be exposed to the potential dangers of the void of space. This, the first commercial spacewalk and the highest altitude that humans have left the safety of their craft with the exception of lunar missions. The reason for this spacewalk, ostensibly to test their new space suits. They've been tested in vacuum environments here on Earth, but in space, anything could happen. Here's NASA astronaut Mike Hopkins.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the first challenges that you're always worried about is how your suit's functioning, right? Because that's what's keeping you alive when you're outside like that.
So how safe or unsafe is this spacewalk?
Marcia, most of the fatalities in space flight have occurred during launches, but leaving the relative safety of the spacecraft has always had its risk. Here's Mike Hopkins again.
One of the hardest parts about our training for spacewalks is what we call incapacitated crew. And so you need to always be able to get your crewmate back into the airlock if something should happen, if they should no longer be conscious.
The first spacewalking astronaut almost 60 years ago had his suit expand so much he had to deflate it to get back inside. Over the ensuing years, there have been a number of potential spacewalk disasters, including one where a water leak caused an astronaut to almost drown in his suit.
Thank you, John. My World Report co-host, John Northcott, in studio. People in Chiang Rai, Thailand, wade through waist-deep waters this morning. Special forces have been called in to rescue residents from the flooding. They are leaving in boats and in helicopters. Rain brought on by Typhoon Yagi caused this most recent flooding, but the Thai government says rain in northern provinces over the past month has resulted in landslides and at least 33 deaths. Britain's National Health Service is in critical condition. A 9-week review of the system points to crumbling buildings and long wait times. And today, people in the UK will learn what their government plans to do. Crystal Gomansing is dealing with this story, and she has more on the problems and the prescription.
An awful state. That's the label Dr. Ara Darzi put on emergency care in the UK after the House of Lords member conducted his review.
But
the vital signs are stable.
Darzy's comprehensive report points to past austerity measures as starving the system, leading to crumbling buildings. 7.6 million people are sitting on wait lists for care, partly because of the pandemic and treatment cancellations.
We just need to put the right investment in the NHS. We need to engage our amazing doctors, nurses, community.
Fixing it is a priority, says the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting.
By the end of this Parliament, we see waiting lists millions lower than they are today.
The answer isn't more money or doctors, says John Bell, a Canadian-British physician who often consults with governments.
We have to move things to the community, try and keep things out of hospital wherever we can, and use a whole range of innovations to do that.
The UK says it has a 10-year plan to restore the NHS back to health. Details are still to come. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Wildlife officers in Yellowknife are trying to track down a dangerous wolf. It attacked a hiker this weekend on a popular trail just outside the city. As Shannon Scott tells us, officials are still trying to understand why it acted that way.
This animal was not acting like a normal wild wolf.
Territorial veterinarian Naima Jutha says, while wolves aren't uncommon in and around Yellowknife, what happened on Sunday sure was. A hiker was attacked by a lone wolf on the popular Rainy Hill Trail, about a 15-minute drive from downtown Yellowknife. Normally a busy area, now the trailhead is closed. Jutha is part of the team working on figuring out why the wolf approached a hiker and their dog on Sunday, an incident that ultimately led to what Jutha calls a significant bite.
It was a bite but didn't shred any tissue or anything like that, so there were punctures.
Sadie Parr has been studying wolves for more than 15 years. She says they're generally shy animals, and encounters with humans are very rare. But she says wolves can become accustomed to humans, which can make run-ins more dangerous.
Is the animal being fed? Because some people do that, believe it or not, or even indirectly through accessing garbage or camp foods or pet foods that are left outside.
Resource officers continue to investigate the incident. They've even been using a drone to fly over the area. One wolf has been found and killed, but it will take time before we know if it's the wolf in question. A second wolf has also been spotted. The trail, meanwhile, remains closed, and people are being asked to stay away from the area for now. Shannon Scott, CBC News, Yellowknife.
That is the latest in national and international news from World Report. Stay with CBC News as we will keep you updated on the SpaceX Polaris crew doing their first commercial spacewalk. And right now we can tell you that engineer Sarah Gillis has popped out and is checking out outer space. Awesome. I'm Marcia Young.
.3 FM.
The whole thing.
Also at 9:90 a.m. on the app or on YouTube this morning, and we sure hope you watch because we have candidates coming here. 5 of 6 people who are vying to win this seat in next week's by-election here in Elmwood-Transcona. Our location is the Elm Pizzeria and Cafe, and they open at 7, and they promise an El Salvadorian unique breakfast. In fact, we're surrounded by cookies of the world here. We're going to hear from one of the managers here a little bit about the diversity in the neighborhood and how that's represented here at this spot through food. So this is 163 Henderson Highway, just over the Disraeli Bridge, and also at the base of the Redwood if you want to join us. So what are the issues in this election for people who live here? Well, this hour we're going to hear that there is a growing diversity of population here. There are needs with housing, there are challenges with transportation, and it's a food desert. So those are among the things that we're going to hear. And then we're going to hear from some of the candidates. As mentioned, we have 5 of 6 candidates here running, and so they're all going to be sitting down for interviews. The first 2 to be joining us in this first hour of our program here on CBC are going to be Nicholas Geddart, who's running for the Green Party here. And then at 10 to 7, an interesting interview with the candidate for the Canadian Forward Party, they are called. This is a brand new party, so we're going to learn more about that as we speak with him. And they are following a housing model and solution that is out of the UK. So we're also going to learn more about that and why they think that's something that could help the problems here, not only in this neighborhood, but in Canada. So stay tuned. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells at 6:11 a.m. and find out what's happening in our news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the number of homeless encampments is growing in Winnipeg and across Canada, and it is creating some tension with people who live in nearby areas. And it's also raising questions about whether these encampments are even legal. We're going to look into that question coming up. As well, a nonprofit turning a southwest Winnipeg home into an addiction center says it is willing to answer any questions from the public. Regenesis Center's plans for a temporary facility in Lindenwoods are going to go ahead after a split vote at Winnipeg City Council yesterday. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi, good morning to you.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm going to make you really jealous because I'm going to read you some of the menu.
Bring it on.
Like Salvadorian Topico, there's tamales, there's pupusas, which are like my faves. So, yeah, we'll have to bring you something back.
Any shortbread there?
No, we're going to learn about the cookies. Like I said, there are a lot of different kind of cookies.
Okay, now I'm waiting.
So we'll hear about that. Yeah. All right. Anything going on in the weather today? Obviously, it's going to be hot again.
Yes, we're going to warm up today. Currently, Winnipeg 16 at this time. We're seeing some cloudy conditions outside. We're expecting that to clear up as we get into the morning. Then we warm up to a high of 29, though it's going to feel above 30 with the humidex factored in. Some windy conditions will pick up, then becoming breezy by at the noon time. We are just heading to that high of 29. In other regions, Brandon is cloudy at this time and Dauphin is misty, and we saw some light showers earlier in that region. Quickly in traffic, I'll tell you there's a motor vehicle collision that knocked down traffic standard at Donald and River, and lights are flashing red in all directions. So I might advise you to treat that intersection as an always stop. Use caution while passing as the repair crews are trying to get things done. No delays at this time, but as you get into the morning period, just take it as you start your day. Also, Academy Road westbound, that's between Wellington Crescent and Wellington Crescent southbound to Kinnison Boulevard, where there's some curb lanes being walked on there. The north side sidewalk is also being walked on. It's going to be closed for electrical walk, so you might want to treat that carefully as you approach that area. Anything in traffic, let us know. 788-3093.
So let's get the lay of the land here where we are on Henderson Highway. This is a huge riding. It encompasses all of Elmwood. It encompasses, it goes north onto the edge of North Kildonan, and it pushes into Transcona, which has been sprawling and growing. If you haven't been to Transcona in a while, you'll just keep on driving and driving east. There's also a question about what's going to happen next year if there's an election next year, of course, we expect to be called, because Dugald the boundaries are going to be redrawn, and so the community of Dugald is going to be included. There is some thinking that may benefit the Conservatives because Dugald voters have gone traditionally Conservative in the past. But this seat has been firmly held by the NDP forevermore, except in 2015 when Stephen Harper won his majority and Lawrence Todt took this seat for the Progressive Conservatives. So this time around, there's a lot of excitement for the Conservatives who are looking to see could they break through here again in Elmwood-Transcona. So that's part of the storyline that we're going to be following today, whether or not this seat will change. It was left for a by-election next week after Daniel Blakey from the NDP had resigned, stepped down, and he's now working with the provincial government. So when I first mentioned on air we're going to be live here talking about Elmwood-Transcona, I got an invite from the Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal Corporation on Poplar Avenue. That's just up the road from the cafe where we are today on Henderson. They said there were a lot of people that wanted to weigh in, so they invited me down. It's a community nonprofit organization. It's the site of the Elmwood EK Active Living Center for Seniors and also Tots in Elmwood. They also help with housing and hunger and all kinds of other needs in this part of the city. I took them up on the invitation and I dropped in on a very busy Tuesday morning, and Leilani Esteban Villarba spoke with me. She's the executive director.
So we provide programming from 0 to forever, and we target vulnerable populations. and families.
Do people, are these folks dropping in, or do you actually have targeted programs that are happening for families with little ones? I'm seeing little tubes and play sessions set up behind me and babies on the floor.
So we have programming that is barrier-free and very accessible. So we don't like to create a lot of like paperwork or registrations or anything like that. So most of our programming is drop-in, young families, and we have a lot of seniors. A lot of different cultures come in. We have one of the higher Métis populations in Winnipeg.
Has the population shifted in any way? Like, what are you noticing?
Absolutely. We see a lot. Like, I've been in this community for almost 20 years, and we see a lot of newer, younger families coming in and newcomers. So that's the shift, I think, is the newcomers.
And what's the economic makeup for folks?
So this is my favorite question, because Chalmers is unique in that we are a lower income demographic, but we are surrounded by higher income earners. So our numbers get watered down and we get kind of ignored or kind of, missed. A lot of the funding, we kind of miss it because they don't see us as a lower income population.
And when you say you're surrounded by sort of higher income areas, are you thinking about, just so people can situate themselves in Winnipeg, what around you would those neighborhoods be?
So Glen Elm, some of the Glen Elm residents are higher income earners. There are some areas within the Elmwood-Transcona constituency that definitely water us down. And that is kind of what I want our politicians, the candidates, to understand, is that Chalmers is a high need community and we need a lot more resources brought into our community.
What do you think that the highest needs are here that would help people?
We need housing. We need food security. Food security is just one of those things that we see almost at least 10 people a day looking for some support in terms of food.
You mean like walking in here that you see?
Yes. So we do emergency food hampers, we do frozen meals, we do lunches, we do all of those things, and Chalmers, Elmwood is a food desert. The closest grocery store that's within walking distance closed down.
Where was that one?
Balkans. And they were very community, family friendly, very, very neighborhood friendly.
You're pointing this way. Was it on Talbot or where was it?
Stadacona and Levi. So that was the only thing that people could walk to with strollers or mobility issues. That was the only one. Now that it's closed down, there's nothing close by. There's a bus route that takes you to Freshco, but you would have to take your stroller, you would have to take a wheelchair, you would have mobility challenged. And then having to lug all those groceries back and then walk them to the house, because most of our income earners are walkers. They are active transportation. They do not have vehicles. It's very difficult for them to get around. We have provided free emergency rides, transportation. Our funding has completely disappeared for that, so we aren't able to do that as often. We can do it for our end homelessness clients, but we can't do it for anyone else in need.
Is that provincial funding stream, or is there?
It's federal.
So what's your question for the folks that are running to represent this area?
What I would like to know is what their plan is in terms of supporting those organizations that are very grassroots level, and how do they plan on finding the funding to give our organizations enough money to sustain ourselves in terms of what we provide to the community, because we all know that those grassroots organizations like ourselves, we kind of prevent everything else from happening. So we get to the root of the cause of the problem and make less of a ripple in terms of the systems that they have to access later on, right? So we're kind of like the buffer to keep that from happening in the future for some of our low-income earners, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to know, like, what are they going to do to support us? And how do they make it easier for us without inundating us with a whole bunch of paperwork and a whole bunch, because we don't have time for that. And then not have the red tape to create barriers for people to access those funds. And then to have enough funding to support that program, like as in like having enough people to staff it so that we could actually like process the people who need to get these resources.
How short are you now?
If I had funding, I would probably have at least 3 more housing staff and then a building that actually houses my staff, because as you can see, we get very creative in terms of how we operate.
What Leilani's referring to here is that we described, and you can hear the kids playing in the background, the families. There's literally, we're in an open space, but then there's literally desks for staff that are just on the side wall here in the middle of all of the noise and such, and they're on the phone and presumably dealing with clients and such. So what's it like for you when that sustainable funding isn't there? You gave us an example just now about, I think it was transportation you were saying, and then you had to stop that program, you said, because you didn't have the funding. Does that mean you're literally here at the door saying no?
Actually, we have had to say no to a lot of people who have had to go to medical appointments, and we look for other resources to help support that. It's so hard to say no to someone who really needs to get to a doctor's appointment or needs to buy groceries for their family. It is so hard.
Is there a lot of people that are watching this moment in terms of federal politics and by-election, or is there a lot of engagement, would you say, or not so much?
We did invite our politicians down. 3 of them came, and we did an Elmwood Unity Walk, and we showed them what the community was like, and we showed them our pockets of need and the higher risk areas in our community, and we handed out care packages to unsheltered folks and people in encampments.
Anything to add or any other questions that you think that we should put in front of the candidates as they join us?
One thing that we do not have in Elmwood is programming space, and that is accessible to the community. So we are probably one of the only, I guess, resource centers that has a programming space.
So that's Leilani Esteban Villarba. She's the executive director of the Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal Corporation, which is at 180 Poplar, which is just off Henderson Highway. We're on Henderson this morning at 163. We're at the Elm. We're broadcasting live, and we have 5 of the 6 candidates that are going to be live with us on CBC talking about why they think they deserve to win in the federal by-election coming up next week. So stay tuned for those questions and to learn more about the neighborhood.
Ever hear a really good radio show and fall in love right away? Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Find CBC radio shows like As It Happens and Now or Never and stream them anytime, anywhere for free. Download CBC Listen today.
6:24 a.m. is the time right now. You just heard Leilani talk about how Elmwood, when you look at this part of the riding where we are, has grown in diversity. And you can hear that I'm eating. Well, I'm eating things that represent that diversity because if you're on YouTube, you're getting a treat here. We have cookies. Chloe's going to hold them up to the camera there. These cookies were made by Elman Montoya, who's sitting with me this morning. Elman is the chef and the manager here at the Elm. Hello there.
How are you today?
I'm very well. How are you?
Very good. Very exciting.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about these cookies, because you said these represent the diversity. So what are we looking at?
Oh, yeah. Also, we have in here, in this place, we offer different bread from different country. I make this different recipe. And we take the more representative each country.
Why do you do that? Is it because you see the customers here?
Yeah,
how do you do it?
Yeah, because, I am from El Salvador, and we have a lot of customers from different Spanish country. Mexico between Argentina, and here a lot of people from Chile, from Colombia, from El Salvador, from Central America. And sometimes coming people asking me for if it's possible we make this bread, or if we don't have available the bread from each country. And one day is coming a lady from Honduras and asking me for a specific bread for this country. And no, I don't have idea about this bread, but tell me. And she explained, and she showed me a picture, and okay. And I checked the recipe and the process. Okay, when I have it ready, I let you know. And I make.
I love that.
And this time is, and my brain is
Yeah.
and that's possible. We make different bread from different country because we have different customers from different countries.
I love that you make the effort to do that. So your customers say, "Could you try this almond? This would make it's a taste of home."
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, because everything we're making here.
Yeah. Now, everything that you make here is a taste of your home. So before we get into sort of your specialties, which is El Salvador's your home,
yes.
And a lot of the breakfast and foods are from there. Where are these cookies from? Like the one I was just eating, it's like a yellow one with, what's in the middle here?
This is a pineapple jam.
Okay.
It's a homemade pineapple jam.
Okay.
And we're making here. This is in El Salvador we call calcañal in Spanish. Calcañal.
Okay.
And it's with a regular flour and with a specific recipe.
Very good.
And we have a polvoron in here. Is this other one?
Okay.
This is a popular bread from Mexico.
Okay.
And this is rice cookie, and that we call salpora in Spanish. But it's with rice flour.
Yep.
And this is with corn flour, cornstarch flour.
This is the oblong one on the end. Yep.
And in America or Mexico, between Argentina, the Spanish language country, we share a couple, culture food.
What's it like for you in Elmwood? We should just let people know, Elman, that you are managing here, but you actually are cooking here, and you have traditional El Salvadorian breakfasts, and tamales and such, beautiful. But you have been cooking for a long time in Elmwood, because you also would have worked kind of up the way at JC Tacos, which in Winnipeg is like known. People come from all over to have authentic tacos. What's it like living in Elmwood? Do you like working here and being part of the neighborhood?
Oh yeah. I live in here for 5 years. I come from my country 6 years ago, but I live a couple months in the other side, the main street. But after this, I moved for this area, and I live in this area, and I think it's quiet. For me, it's good.
So for you found a sense of community here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I live only in this area, around this area.
You're very, very
close.
Specific and very small geographical area here in Elmwood.
Yeah, and I like it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's good. And I enjoy it.
Who taught you to cook?
Pardon me?
Who taught you to cook?
It's long history.
Okay.
It's long history because I started to cook at home when I have maybe 7 home.
Oh, when you were little.
Yeah, very, very little.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like I like to try different flavors.
Yep.
And mix different recipe or different ingredients and they try.
What's the most popular thing on your menu that people like the most here?
For
what do people order the most?
Breakfast.
Yeah, for breakfast.
It's breakfast.
It's going to be 6:30 right away. We should do breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah. And for breakfast, the rancheros, huevos rancheros.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fish.
I love
number one. It's very good. It's very good because
with the beans and the plantain.
Plantain. Yeah, it's something different.
Love
and it's very authentic. This is popular in the morning, and pupusas.
Yep.
And tamales. And here we know there's not the bestseller, the pupusa.
Okay.
And we know the history for how my people share this culture in here in Winnipeg. I know the history, but here this restaurant is not the number one. It's popular for the people that know about the food, but the more popular things is ranchero.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're going to spread the love for pupusas and get us all into that because I know how good they are.
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Thank you.
But only we have 1 year with this menu.
Okay.
Now.
Well, we'll see.
Starting last year. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having us here. I know you're going to go back to the kitchen. We're going to get off and do the news. We're grateful for you having us here in Elmwood, Elman. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming too.
That is Elman Montoya speaking with us today. Popped out of the kitchen here at the Elm. If you want to come down, we are talking not only food, we're talking politics. Stay tuned. The Green Party candidate is going to be joining us. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:31, it is 16 degrees, and it's going to get windy today and warm as well. The winds southeast 20, gusting to 40, increasing to 40, gusting to 60 around noon today, and a high of 29, humidex 34. The number of homeless encampments is growing in Winnipeg and right across the country, and it is creating tension with some who live in those neighborhoods, raising questions about whether encampments are legal. CBC's Emily Brass looked into that question.
We're getting really tired.
Teresa Hunter lives near some encampments in downtown Winnipeg. She says the tenters are causing problems like fires, garbage, and aggressive behavior.
We are really pressing the city to do something. People need to have shelter and they need to be supported.
But from a legal standpoint, moving people out isn't so easy. Judges in other provinces have ruled the Charter of Rights and Freedoms includes rights to housing, even if that housing is an encampment. UBC lawyer Alex Flynn.
The court noted that sleeping is a basic human right that's essential for life, liberty, and security of the person.
Judges also found that right to life outweighs their neighbors' rights to use the parks for leisure and is also more important than local bylaws on things like sanitation and fires. A BC judge laid out criteria that has to be met before an eviction. Cities must show there's enough housing for all the people they want to evict and prove that housing meets their individual needs, such as being allowed to use drugs or have pets. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
For more on the legality of encampments, check out Emily's story and video on our website. You can also hear her conversation with Marcy Marcusa coming up at 7:50 this morning in the next hour right here on Information Radio. Winnipeg's plan to offer $40 million in subsidies to redevelop Portage Place Mall has elicited a range of reactions. The mayor is in support. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is skeptical. And a Winnipeg man who works in an office inside that downtown mall says he's just eager to see it improved. Paul Hagerman works for the nonprofit Canadian Food Grains Bank.
Those of us who are in there as tenants are finding that maintenance is suffering a little bit. And so we're looking for new investment for the mall. Even if we don't get to stay, that would be fine.
City Council will vote on the subsidies this month. Plans to turn a house in Lindenwoods into an addictions recovery center are going ahead. Regenesis Center for Recovery plans to make a home on Lindenwood Drive into a facility housing 6 people. Now, some in the area appealed the proposal, but the vote was split in City Council yesterday. Area Councillor John Orlico telling the appeal committee the location isn't right.
We got a community center, we got a school, we have care homes around there. Let them come back with a program that addresses the neighborhood's concerns a bit more before we go forward, because this really is setting that precedent on how we're going to go forward for all our neighborhoods. And I think the program and the location are just not properly suited.
Regenesis plans to use the house as a temporary site for the recovery center until next August. People forced to flee a growing wildfire near Bunabonabee Cree Nation have returned home. The Canadian Red Cross says the last group of evacuees flew back to the northern community Monday. Thousands had to leave their homes after wildfire reached the outskirts of the community last month. Stacey Robinson and her 3 young children were among the first to return.
I knew I was coming home to my house, to my home. Everything was okay. My kids would be coming home with me with nothing damaged. Made me feel kind of whole.
5 other First Nation communities in northern Manitoba were also evacuated because of wildfires this summer. All have since returned home. A former Manitoba teacher has been sentenced to 33 months after police found what a judge called horrific child pornography in his home. Alan Venice was sentenced in July for possessing child pornography a year after police found thousands of the images on his computer, phone, and USB drives. Court heard impact statements from the 13 victims who were able to be identified through a process known as hash matching. Monique Saint-Germain at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection says it is a simple but powerful piece of technology.
It is like DNA, but it's for technology. It enables you to find like content. So it enables you to find where the same thing exists in another place.
St. Germain says the technology helps match newly found images to known ones where victims' identities are already known. Well, history has just been made in space, with SpaceX carrying out the first ever private spacewalk. SpaceX mission control in Florida as tech entrepreneur Jared Isaacman leaves the capsule. Later, SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis had her turn. Today's spacewalks are the main focus of a 5-day mission, which is being financed by Isaacman. The crew launched Tuesday from Florida, rocketing farther from Earth than anyone since the NASA moon landings. The spacewalks are designed to test SpaceX's new space suits. You can hear more national and international news on World Report at 7 and find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
I'm nervous watching it. I can't even look, right?
You better hope those suits are good.
I know. I would never have the guts to do what we're
me
watching.
either.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
6:36 a.m. It's time to go back to our studios because we are live out in community at 163 Henderson Highway at the Elm. We're talking about the Transcona by-election, Elmwood-Transcona by-election here. Abby is back in studio at 541 Portage Ave and has the day's forecast.
Yeah, we're looking at a breezy day across the province today with mostly sunny conditions and partly cloudy skies in some areas. Temperatures will range from 15 in Winnipeg to 29 in Morris, and it's going to feel warmer with the humidity factored in. A few showers here and there. Thunderstorms might come in some areas, and that we felt in the afternoon. Also, we do have that air quality advisory in effect for central Manitoba, including the Power, Flin Flon and surrounding areas due to that smoke causing poor visibility and air quality affecting people. So conditions might change quickly. Everyone's health is at risk during this period. Winnipeg at 16 heading to 29. Brandon 14 heading to a high of 28. Thompson is currently 2 degrees heading to a high of 18. Similar conditions for Churchill heading to a high of 19, currently 6 degrees. Dauphin all the way down to Morris, we're going to be seeing temperatures hover between 13 and 17 at this time, and we'll be seeing highs near 29.
Thanks, Abby. And the traffic situation, anything we should pass along quickly here?
Just for traffic, still that light standard down at Dunedin Rivers. You just have to treat that intersection as always stop, and while our crews repair that light at that area. But we're hearing that it's restored, but you still need to take it easy along that axis.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I actually saw that note come up just as you were talking that the lights are restored. So hopefully it's going to be smooth sailing the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
788-3093, by the way, if you need to reach Abby live. 22 minutes to 7 o'clock. And just before we turn to our candidates this half hour, we're live covering the Elmwood-Transcona by-election. We have, I should just mention, 5 of 6 candidates that have agreed to go be with us on CBC. Who will be missing today is the Conservative Party of candidate. The Conservative Party of Canada candidate, Colin Reynolds. CBC reached out to him multiple times, my producer and myself, on multiple platforms and calls. We did not hear back at all. But we do have the Green Party that we're going to talk to this half hour, and we're going to learn about a brand new party this half hour as well. So we're going to hear more about the Canadian Forward Party, so stay tuned for that. Right now, let's look at business news. Crystalie Ramlakan is here to tee up some stories. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
Why is TD Bank being ordered to pay a $38 million fine?
Well, this is over credit reports, which help a bank decide whether it should lend you money or not. So a U.S. regulator says for several years, TD repeatedly shared inaccurate and negative information about its customers with credit reporting agencies, potentially tarnishing credit scores. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says the bank took far too long to correct many mistakes and did not investigate some disputes because it cared more about expanding the bank's empire through mergers. So this payout includes more than $10 million in restitution to tens of thousands of customers. For more on this, we spoke to Lynette Perda, who is a professor at the School of Business at Queen's University. And she says this case highlights how important it is for companies to listen to reports from frontline staff and escalate them appropriately.
Even a temporary deviation from what is accurate can impact their day-to-day. And we do see issues with that where consumers perhaps are inappropriately flagged for different kinds of credit assessments or mistakes occur. And it is very difficult for their day-to-day existence.
Now, TD says it self-identified these matters long before the settlement and voluntarily and proactively implemented enhancements to how it handles disputes. But, the bank continues to face scrutiny in the U.S. over its anti-money laundering program as well. It expects to pay more than $3 billion U.S. in penalties to resolve that issue.
Let's go to another story next here, Crystalie. Yesterday we were talking about the high cost of housing, the need for more supply. Actually, we're going to talk to the Canadian Future Party. Actually, I incorrectly got the name of the party wrong, but they have an interesting plan for housing we'll find out about soon. But can you expand on what is standing in the way of more homes being built right now? You have a new report to talk about, right?
So this new report from Desjardins says an ongoing labor shortage in the construction industry is the main thing holding back new housing starts. So the Canadian Home Builders Association estimates Canada needs more than 1 million additional residential construction workers. But it says the industry is facing slower population growth and an immigration system not focused on attracting skilled tradespeople. So this report, which was written by 3 economists, also says elevated interest rates and inflation have increased the cost to finance construction projects. Now, the federal government has been trying to kickstart new housing supply through measures such as new tax incentives and building on public lands. But the report says even with that increase, it's still not going to be enough. It's still going to be short of the pace needed to achieve targets to restore affordability by 2030 that have been set out by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. But the report says even if Canada can't meet its lofty goals, the housing supply crisis can still be lessened through building as many homes as possible.
What are the numbers telling us, Crystalie?
In Europe, markets are rallying. So Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are higher. Japan is up. Shanghai is down. Hong Kong is up. Oil is up 69 cents to $68 US per barrel. Gold is up $6.71 to $2,518.48 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.03 of a cent to 73.7 cents US.
All right. Thank you, Crystalie.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
With our business news, Crystalie Ramlakan. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're on location at the Elm this morning. We're covering the Elmwood by-election, Elmwood-Transcona by-election that's coming up here next week. And some of the candidates are going to be joining us. But first, let's listen in for 2 minutes to one of the people that we spoke to in the neighborhood about the needs here in this part of Winnipeg. Louise Mangali lives in Elmwood. She works as a housing coordinator, actually, at the Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal Corporation up the way. We sat down just inside the door of the center, so you're going to hear we're in the lobby. The center was just busy in there on Tuesday, and she explained some of the things that she's hoping for from whoever is going to be elected. We actually popped out. There's so many people coming in and out. We thought we'd come into the vestibule where it's quiet. What's kept you busy this morning?
So this morning we were just working with some housing clients in the neighborhood. We deal with a lot of community members, and specifically folks that are at risk of eviction in the community. And so we do a lot of one-on-one advocacy and work, just trying to make sure that we help them find sustainable ways to find housing, and as well as access to basic needs such as food, laundry services, really anything that they need, and meet them where they're at.
Is that an issue? How big of an issue is that? People that might be facing evictions?
Yes, absolutely. So our housing team began just last year, February 2023, and we've seen a significant growth in terms of folks in the neighborhood that are needing assistance for additional rent support to make sure that the ends meet in terms of paying for their rent and utilities and all those kinds of things, for sure.
Obviously, we're here because we're talking about what governments could be providing. What's top of mind for you when you think about how they could do better?
So a question that I would like to ask, our future candidate or future representative is, what are some ways that you can advocate for the needs in the community, and how can you regularly connect with folks, right? Because at the end of the day, it's so important that we maintain this connection with folks that are in the neighborhood, and so we would really love to see more of that from our future elected candidate.
When you say connect with folks, do you like literal connection to make sure that they don't slip through the cracks somehow if they can't find a place to be or to live, rather?
Yes, we're thinking more so in terms of involvement in the community, because at the end of the day, it's not about, for me personally, it's not about the colors and who the candidate is, but where their heart is for the community and for the people. So that's very important for me.
And for the people, as Louise so beautifully put it. Louise Mangali works at the Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal Corporation. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to CBC Special Broadcast. I call these our community studios. We're at the Elm on Henderson Highway 163. And we have candidates with us now, special stars who got up early this morning for us. So first we're going to hear from Nicholas Geddard. He's here to represent the Green Party. Good morning.
Good morning.
So obviously the vote is next week here in Elmwood-Transcona. The choice is to replace Daniel Blakey's vacant seat, as the MP has gone to work now with, he resigned his seat to work with the province. Pretty good turnout in the advance polls already. There's high interest in this. Why do you want to win here?
Well, I think win is maybe a debatable term. I know my colleague here and myself, we're a smaller party. We consider our wins, I think, differently. And we were just talking outside about the need for diversity of voices, that, it's important to represent everyone, and the major parties don't do that, and having, just 2 or 3 parties that are work with the need to maintain their status quo. If we want to have change, it's a long road in those parties to get that kind of change, but there's also a necessity in the communities to have those issues directly represented. The more we can focus and target certain issues, if there was a housing party that just wanted to do housing policy, I think we would do really great with that. If there was a food waste party that just wanted to deal with the issues of food waste, unfortunately, we have a system that doesn't really promote that, kind of dialogue. We don't all show up, as you mentioned earlier. Community events and stuff like that need all of us to have this conversation together and have it publicly. And so, I think that's really important in the political process, that we are not just trying to win a seat, that
but
we
leaving the relative
trying to develop a conversation in the community, with the community, and for the community.
So, I've never had this happen before. Politicians have never said, don't just talk to me, talk to both of us together. So I'm going to invite our next guest in, and we're just going to take you guys right to the top together, because you were talking about your, someone who's running for another party, and you're both sitting here with us on YouTube. People can see both of you here. So why don't we talk to both of you at the same time? You're referring to Zbig Strihaj. Say your last name for me again.
Strihaj. Right.
All right. Jan Znajic. Thank you very much. Zbig. Zbig is here running for a party that is new. So the party that Zbig you are running for is called the Canadian Future Party.
Yep, you got it right.
I got it right. And before I ask you more about the new party and what you stand for and some of your specific promises for the Greens and the Future Party, can you build on what we just heard here? Because I saw you nodding when the thought came up that we need maybe more diversity of party in our Canadian system, and that's part of why at least Nicholas saying he is here. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. We've been looking at having more or less the same 3 parties running for if you talk to the neighbors, forever. It's not enough. It's not enough anymore. We've seen what they can do, and what they can do seems to, at best be stagnant for us, for the everyday person. And, in recent times, we can easily say that our lives have gotten a little bit worse. Costs have gone up for everything. These parties are no longer representing what the average Canadian needs, what the average Canadian wants. And so, like Nicholas was saying, having smaller parties with special interests is a very good idea. Our party's not like that. It's a little bit more general interest. We're a Big Ten party. We want everybody to come in, so long as they're willing to work together.
I want to ask you, Nicholas, to the Green Party. Some Canadians might be listening and saying, well, your big issue should be climate. But your parties have big challenges. I mean, now we have Elizabeth May is the leader back at the federal level and such. Mm-hmm. So how do you view the Greens, and why do you think that that's a right choice still, if people are listening, for Elmwood-Transcona, and even just overall in Canada, what you stand for in 2024?
Well, I mean, obviously climate is first and foremost. I mean, as was mentioned earlier in the broadcast, you know, we have a smoke warning. We have been coming to a realization, I think, in the last few summers how real this is with, you know, the change in weather, the change in the smoke. So yeah, I mean, I think it's still important to be a strong voice specifically for that. We also promote that, I mean, everyone should be a little bit green. You know, the NDP should have green-leaning policies, and again, that's inviting us as a specialized, focused group who is trying to tackle climate broadly, and working together to find solutions to work with the systems that we have to add climate consciousness to it, to work in the communities that we have to implement climate consciousness, and you know, even things like housing is a very basic way to start that. I know Chalmers has worked with Efficiency Manitoba to have an installation program broadly for the whole community. These are the kind of programs that we need to support, that all parties should support, that there's no real reason not to support them.
I want to turn to Zbig because you mentioned housing, and Zbig, your party has a specific plan around housing. It's called the Hillier Plan. Can you explain a little bit about what your plan would be and how that would be different from what the Liberals are saying to, you know, work with housing and improve it in this country?
Well, realistically, housing is a big policy issue for most Canadians. We know, you know, from east to west, there's just not enough of it. Earlier in the broadcast, you were mentioning, you know, how we're short on tradespeople. Well, we got to fix that issue before we fix anything else. Is let's find the people who want to work in trades. Let's offer them the training that they need. If we can't find them here in Canada, okay, we got to open up some immigration, get them in. But once we have that, you know, we need to do what is essentially wartime style housing. In the 1950s, you know, Canadians knew we needed housing so that people can start their families, putting some money away for themselves, not paying rent, and more importantly, you know, having their own families here in Canada. Well, we got to start doing that again today. It's obvious that corporations no longer are building the smaller starter home that an average person, especially someone here in Manitoba, could afford. So let's get the federal government involved. If we need to, you know, we buy a big construction contract. And using that, we'll build those houses that are 800-900 square feet, but affordable. You know, something that people can build on in the future.
So really returning to government-led subsidized housing, and also
I wouldn't call it subsidized.
No. Okay.
No. We're going to build it. It's going to cost money out of our pocket, but much like many of those projects that the federal government is going to be building, like right now with the Trans-Canada pipeline that we had built. Ultimately, we do plan on selling these houses at cost, so the government will recoup its money. There was no subsidy in the end.
Why do you think, just before we turn back to you, Nicholas, because I know you want to get in on a point that was made, but why do you think that you're the right person to, and your party is the right party for this time for Elmwood-Transcona? Because a lot of people might not even know what your party's about, so maybe explain a little bit about the Canadian Future Party.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we are a Big Tent party. We are the party that, you know, we don't mind if you're a little bit right, if you're a little bit left. We want to have people who are willing to have a conversation, who are willing to look at facts, and have a, you know, proper discussion. Today, you know, if you drive up and down Henderson or any other major road here in Elmwood-Transcona, you'll see a lot of name calling from one party or the other. We're not about that. We want parties that are willing to work together, and that's what we're bringing to the table. A group of people who is diverse, you know, coming from all the parties, and we're trying to find something new together.
And what were you going to build on, Nicholas, here?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point about housing, and I would respectfully disagree with the way that I would feel that would be oriented. I think it must come from government subsidies, and the control and planning has to go to communities. I think we will build those family homes, those seniors homes. I've been talking with people in the community about projects that they would like to see happen, where seniors who are still wanting to live in their communities can stay in their communities, but you know, maybe they no longer fit in their houses. Communities can recognize that need, support that need, and provide the kind of housing for that need. But the government needs to find a good and expedient way to give that power to communities by giving it funding.
I think we can hear a lot about your ideologies through how you're explaining your different thoughts on the housing issue as well. I don't want to leave before our last 2 minutes and ask you to make your pitch about who you are. If people are listening in Elmwood-Transcona and they met you at the Doors Big, who are you? Tell us a little bit about why you think you should represent them.
Right. I'm Zbig. I'm here from the Canadian Future. We're a brand new party. Many people haven't heard of us. We're for the politically homeless people. We're for the people who have looked at the parties in the past and said, I can't vote for these guys. Or for the people who, in recent times really have looked at the parties and said, these are no longer the parties that I call home, that I can sincerely vote for and say they represent my views. How about you, Nicholas? What are you saying of the people that have never met you?
Well, I'm looking for the people who want to get things done and want to get it done in their communities. That's part of that is talking to them about what those needs are, but part of it is bringing them into the Chalmers renewal programs and getting them connected to the supports and services. So I've been telling people Get Her Done's the name. If we want to see action, we can't wait for the government to do it for us. We can't expect that the government's just going to do it for us. So if you want to vote for me, great. If you want to show up in your community and help me work on projects, help the community build up its housing, its food supports, then rather that.
People can go to your platforms to read more and understand more about you and your parties. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you.
It's big. Thank you as well.
Thank you as well.
So please check online, Elmwood-Transcona voters. That is 2 of the 6 folks that are vying for your votes here in the by-election next week. Nicholas Geddard, Elmwood-Transcona candidate for the Green Party of Canada. And also with us representing a new party that you can read more about online is Zbig Stitachars, who is the Canadian Future Party candidate for Elmwood-Transcona here as well. So check out where you can vote. Of course, voting day is September 16th. It is now 3 minutes to 7 o'clock, and Heather Wells joins us from our news center with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, the number of homeless encampments in Winnipeg is growing, not just in Winnipeg, but right across the country. And that is creating tension with some who live in those communities and raising questions about whether the encampments are even legal. We're going to look into that question coming up. And people forced to flee a growing wildfire near Bunabonabee Cree Nation have now returned home. The Canadian Red Cross says the last group of evacuees flew back to the northern community on Monday. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
Talking to candidates here and getting off track. Sorry, Heather. All right, let's get into what's going on in the weather forecast for you, Winnipeg. Today in Winnipeg, clearing this morning, winds are south at 20 and a high of 29 degrees. With humid, it's going to feel like 34, so it's going to be cooking. We had an earlier problem in traffic. Donald and River Lights, they were having problems. That is now all restored. So should be smooth sailing through there. 788-3093 if you do need to reach us. We are live on location. We're talking to candidates running here in Elmwood-Transcona. This is a seat left vacant by the NDP. It's a seat that's been held by the NDP historically. It only went Conservative once. Could that happen again? And what do voters need to hear here from their candidates? We'll get into that in the next hour when the candidates that will join us. At 7:12, we're going to meet the candidate for the People's Party of Canada running here in Elmwood-Transcona. We're also going to talk to the Liberal Party candidate, and then we're going to have more on that special report by Emily Brass about encampments in the city of Winnipeg, and we'll build on what we've heard in the news about what are the legalities about people living there.
On the Current.
I have 8 students and 6 apprentices working with me, and also my brother Derek, who's a master carver himself.
Haida Gwaii is known for hand-carved canoes. The week we were there, a beautiful 15-meter-long one was about to launch. The carver Christian White on how he makes the crafts and the meaning of his work in Haida culture coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
We all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
That was the moment billionaire Jared Isaacman emerged into space. He is part of the SpaceX Polaris Dawn crew performing the first civilian privately funded spacewalk this morning. My co-host John Northcott is covering the story. And John, what more can you tell us?
Marcia, it's called an EVA, extravehicular activity. And it worked. The first to venture out, Jared Isaacman, the billionaire pilot and astronaut, he opened the hatch and stood in the open portal testing the new spacesuits that are at the heart of this mission. He was followed by SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis. It was the first commercial spacewalk, 4 astronauts on board the SpaceX vehicle in total. But since the Dragon has no airlocks, all of them were exposed to the potential dangers of the void of space.
So, John, how safe or unsafe was this spacewalk?
Marcia, in the history of space flight, fatalities have occurred during launches, but leaving the relative safety of the spacecraft has always had its risks. Here's former NASA astronaut Mike Hopkins.
One of the hardest parts about our training for spacewalks is what we call incapacitated crew. And so you need to always be able to get your crewmate back into the airlock if something should happen, if they should no longer be conscious.
The first spacewalking astronaut almost 60 years ago had his suit expand so much that he had to deflate it to get back inside. Over the ensuing years, there have been a number of potential spacewalk disasters, including one where a water leak caused an astronaut to almost drown in his suit. So the success of these suits today are a big step forward. Marcia, in one final note on this story, to steady themselves on the Dragon, the crew had a handrail dubbed Skywalker.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
My World Report co-host John Northcott in studio. In northern Gaza, the Palestinian news agency Wafa is reporting Israel's military has launched more airstrikes at displacement camps. It comes amid international condemnation of yesterday's attack on a central Gaza school. It was being used to shelter 12,000 displaced Palestinians. Sasha Petrusik is in Jerusalem with a reaction.
Survivors sift through the shattered school, pulling out broken bicycles, shoes and toys as Lubna Genwa recounts the double airstrike that hit her shelter. We woke up with rubble on top of us, she says. When we went downstairs, many dead and in bad shape. The injured were rushed to hospital in central Gaza. Health officials say at least 18 people died in Wednesday's attack on the school, operated as a crowded refugee center by UNRWA. That's the UN's main agency helping Palestinians. And UN officials say 6 of its aid workers are among the dead, the highest number in any single strike. Israel says it was targeting a Hamas control center operating among civilians.
What's happening in Gaza is totally unacceptable.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres blames both sides for Gaza's high casualties.
Very dramatic violations of international humanitarian law and the total absence of an effective protection of civilians.
This is the 5th time this school has been targeted by Israel as its military operations continue throughout Gaza. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
The World Health Organization says it has evacuated nearly 100 people from Gaza to the United Arab Emirates. That is its largest medical evacuation yet in this war. Richard Pieperkorn is the WHO's representative for Gaza. He says the occupied territory still needs medical corridors.
A lot of missions are cancelled, including our own missions. Over the last 3 weeks, we probably had 9 missions to the north, including many of those critically essential fuel missions for hospitals. Only 4 happened.
He says more than 10,000 people still need to leave the territory for medical treatment. A spokesperson for India's foreign ministry says 45 Indian nationals have been discharged from the Russian military. And New Delhi is trying to get another 50 released. In July, Russia promised to discharge any Indian nationals who had been falsely induced to join its military and then forced into active combat in Ukraine, in Vietnam. Some roads are still underwater from Typhoon Yagi. It made landfall there over the weekend. New figures from the Vietnamese government this morning show the storm killed more than 225 people More than 100 are still missing. Yagi was the strongest typhoon to hit Vietnam in decades. Thousands of people are still without power in parts of Louisiana and Mississippi this morning. Francine blew into coastal communities as a hurricane yesterday. Power lines are damaged, streets are flooded, and there is a lot of debris to clear away. Freelance reporter Steve Futterman has more.
Just outside New Orleans, Dan Stevens came to see his store destroyed.
I feel all right. It is what it is. At least nobody got hurt. My family's all intact. That's really all I care about.
Officials along the Gulf Coast were warning residents all day yesterday.
We just want everybody to be safe. We've been prepping for the storm, getting different things together, chainsaws so that we can clear off roads.
Francine made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane, blasting the coastline with heavy rains of over 160 kilometers an hour. Residents were told don't try to go out.
The time to evacuate has now passed. It is the time to go to ground and hunker down. We are now no longer in the prepare for a hurricane. We are now in the respond for a hurricane.
Those attempting to drive face torrential downpours, making it difficult to even see.
Holy shit.
GPS systems issued warnings.
Storm surge warning affected area ahead. Please proceed with caution.
Because of the geography in the New Orleans area, a big concern throughout the night was the levee.
As long as the levees hold up, we should be okay. We should be okay as long as the levees hold up.
Francine's intensity has now gone down, but it's still strong enough to cause damage. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Philadelphia.
Firefighters battling 3 wildfires east of Los Angeles are taking advantage of cooler weather, but the bridge fire is now the largest in California. This man is one of dozens of people who have lost their home.
This is my home. This is the only place I've been for the last 30 years, and it's just sad.
Tens of thousands of buildings are in danger zones across Southern California. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are heading to battleground states today. Both presidential candidates are hoping to flip support in their favor in time for November's election. Vice President Harris will hold rallies in Charlotte and Greensboro in North Carolina. Former President Donald Trump is heading to Tucson, Arizona. These rallies come just 2 days after what could be their only debate. An estimated 67.1 million people watched on Tuesday. That is more viewers than the Biden-Trump debate in June. A theme is emerging at this year's Toronto International Film Festival. Stories about women, aging, and body image are taking center stage. CBC's senior entertainment reporter Eli Glasner tells us more.
I just feel off. Look at my teeth. See how sharp they are?
It's a little bit weird. From feral females to horror films about beauty treatments.
One single injection unlocks your DNA.
At the Toronto International Film Festival, the way society treats women aging is in the spotlight. Night Bitch has been described as a comedy for women and a horror film for men. Amy Adams plays a mother whose frustration leads to transformation.
Mama fuzzy.
I'm not fuzzy.
She held nothing back.
I knew from reading the book that this would be an opportunity to just dive into the deepest, most feral parts of me.
The actor and mother says the films are inspiring a new conversation about how Hollywood treats women.
And I hope that momentum continues.
Studies show in Hollywood, women over the age of 40 only get 20% of roles. In the film The Last Showgirl, Canadian Pamela Anderson is the one aging out. Jamie Lee Curtis, who co-stars with Anderson, says the former Baywatch actor who has stopped using makeup was perfect for the role.
That there's something beautiful, that she is the epitome of natural beauty.
Curtis describes the current conversation as cultural confusion.
This cosmeceutical industrial complex, which is feeding all of us every day through advertising, that we are not enough.
But the films making waves at TIFF suggests something different. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
And I was talking over poor Melissa, but you are listening live to CBC in Elmwood. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Our community studio today is the Elm at 163 Henderson Highway, a cafe and pizzeria. They just opened their doors for breakfast, and they've got a really cool El Salvadorian breakfast. All the pizzas are named after the neighborhoods. They got the Kildonan and the Glen Elm. The cookies represent the growing diversity in this area, we learned in the last hour. So if you can make it down and join us, we are here because there is a by-election here next week in Elmwood-Transcona. This is a huge riding. It has changed a lot. There's different needs in different pockets of the riding. We're going to hear more about those needs this hour on the program. In addition, this hour on the show, we have candidates who will be joining us. So we're going to be hearing from the candidate who's representing the People's Party of Canada here. We're also going to hear from the Liberal candidate that is running here. But this has long been an NDP stronghold. So we'll find out who's going to win this next week in the by-election. We have 5 of the 6 candidates represented on the program today. The Conservative Party of candidate, we reached out to him multiple times, and the party did not return any of our requests for air. So he will not be joining us this morning. This riding has gone Conservative once, by the way, with Lawrence Towett back in 2011. And that's when Stephen Harper's had won the majority all across Canada. So they had a big win there. So they're trying to make gains. So we're going to see who's going to win here. The candidates are making their pitches, and we're going to hear from voters about what their needs are. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells and get into the day here for you. Heather, out my window, it's mostly clowdy. What are you doing with your headlines this morning? What's developing?
Well, we've got Winnipeg's plan to offer $40 million to redevelop Portage Place Mall. That money would come in subsidies, and it's garnering a range of reactions. The mayor is in support of the plan. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is a little skeptical, and a Winnipeg man who works in an office in Portage Place Mall says he's just eager to see it improved. So we'll hear some of that coming up. As well, a nonprofit turning a Southwest Winnipeg home into an addiction centre says it is willing to answer any questions from the public. Regenesis Centre's plans for a temporary facility in Linden Woods are going ahead after a split vote at City Council yesterday. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby, the weather, what's up?
It's going to be a windy and warm one today. Currently, Winnipeg, 16 degrees. We're seeing cloudy skies, but that should be clearing up as we get into the morning, more into the morning, with warm high of 29. With a humidex factored in, it's going to be in the range of the mid-30s. In other regions, air quality advisory in effect for central and northern Manitoba, including the powerfully influent and surrounding areas. This is due to that smoke coming in from northern Saskatchewan, causing very poor air quality and reduced visibility, so you need to take care out there. Churchill and Thompson both seeing sunrise at this time, and down south we're seeing cloudy conditions, and that should be clearing as we get into the morning. Traffic updates, we're just going to see that one I mentioned about Wellington Crescent southbound to Kenniston Boulevard. We hear that the curb lane is being walked on, so you need to take care. That's going to be closed for electrical work. And then Abenuji making I just remember the eastbound lanes, you just have to take care as you go from Pembina Highway all the way to Rivers. That's due to sewer work being in construction period in that axis, so you have to take care. If you see anything in traffic, just let us know. 788-3093.
Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on CBC at 7:14 a.m. And as we've been mentioning, September 16th, Elmwood-Transcona, the by-election next week. They'll be choosing a new MP to replace Daniel Blakey. They already had advanced voting here, and there was 14% of eligible voters casting ballots here in Elmwood-Transcona. That was marginally higher than a by-election around Toronto, so there's high interest here in what's going to happen. Before we turn our attention to the next candidate who's joined us here on the broadcast, let's hear from another voter. Even though we're in Elmwood this morning, this riding's massive. That means there's a lot of diversity of population and needs. Next on the show, a 29-year-old voter who straddles 2 neighborhoods and loves, as she puts it, the small town vibes of both.
My name is Amy Wood. I am a resident of Transcona, and I work in Elmwood. I have voted ever since I've been eligible to, so I am very politically minded. I participate in every election. I am planning on voting NDP.
What do you hope that they achieve to make your life better here in Transcona and by extension, Elmwood and the riding? What do you see in terms of the top needs here?
It's kind of interesting because there's a lot of differences between Transcona and Elmwood I've noticed since working here. Working in Elmwood, I've been shown like there's a bigger need for like housing. There is issues as far as like low income goes that are affecting people here in a different way than it is affecting people in Transcona. So I would like to see somebody who can be mindful of that as well, that different issues affect different communities in a different way. Even though we are one riding, they are very different communities. We are seeing a lot less unhoused folks in Transcona, but there is still like an issue with like as far as like rent goes, people trying to make ends meet that way. That's the issues that I hear more in Transcona. People are housed, but it's coming down to like, do I buy food or do I pay rent kind of thing. Whereas here, it's more like I can't even get housed here in Elmwood, which is where we are. But yeah.
Yeah, we're standing out here just off Brazier. Now, I'm wondering for yourself, when you think about the NDP, who you supported, nationally, what speaks to you about what they might be offering you as a voter this time around?
I will self-identify myself here because I do think it is important to kind of, for people to understand, I am a queer person as well. As far as my politics is also very, very queer. So as far as like my rights as a queer person and as somebody who's female identified as well, reproductive rights and stuff, I find that NDP tends to align more with those ideas that I have. They're more vocal about it. Some parties have also been very vocal about not supporting queer rights, not supporting women's rights, that kind of thing. So those folks do not deserve my support, in my opinion. I am a firm believer in the personal is political, right? So I definitely, my identity plays a big part in how I vote, as well as, I want to vote for a candidate who is going to help my community on a personal level and the greater community as well, like Elmwood-Transcona as well.
What do you love about living here?
Living in Transcona, I find that because I actually used to work in Transcona as well. I was working as a pharmacy assistant. I knew all of my clients at the pharmacy and I knew people from church, school, that kind of thing. So it's a very close-knit community. And then coming into Elmwood, it's kind of the same, which I thought was super, super interesting. But it's a very tight-knit community, and the events that are happening in the area and stuff, you see the same faces and stuff like that. So it's very almost small town kind of vibes in both Elmwood and Transcona respectively. So it's really, really cool. I love these areas so much.
Amy Wood works as a community connector in Elmwood and lives in Transcona, loving the small town vibes in this riding. Well, as mentioned, we are covering the Elmwood-Transcona by-election here, hearing from voters and hearing from candidates. And I'm pleased to say that our next candidate is here live at the Elm with us. We're at 163 Henderson. The People's Party of Canada has had strong results in some Manitoba ridings, and the party's candidate running here in Elmwood-Transcona by-election is Sarah Couture. Hello there.
Hi.
So tell me, what do you see as the most important issue facing Elmwood-Transcona residents in this election?
A lot of the things I've been told when I've gone door to door. Sorry.
That's okay. We're just fixing your mic. No problem.
With my canvassing team is a lot of people are again lower income, and there's a lot of housing issues. People are saying they're paying the same amount in rent as they would for a mortgage, but yet they can't get a mortgage because the interest rates are too high, and according to the bank, they don't qualify.
Yeah. So this is you're building on what we just heard from Amy about some of the housing issues. What would you do if you were elected here, and what is your party's plan to help with housing?
So the party's plans with housing is to actually lower the interest rate so people can actually get in to houses through getting mortgages, but not having to pay the 5 to 6 or in some cases 12% of interest on a mortgage. Because again, people should not have to choose between having a roof over their head or having food in their family's stomachs.
And how would a political party effectively lower the interest rate? Be able to have that power and over the Bank of Canada setting the rates?
We can put legislation in and bring that up in the House. This way, we can put legislation in to stop the rising increases.
For yourself, why are you running for this seat? Do you live in the riding? What drew you to politics?
So I got drawn to politics in 2018 when I actually helped form the People's Party. I was one of the signing people to allow them to become a party. I don't live in the riding. I grew up in St. Vital area, and me and my husband live just a little outside the city towards Dugald.
Okay.
And with the boundaries being redrawn, this is going to affect us next year and everything as well too.
So you put your name forward because Dugald, where you live, is actually going to be drawn in to this riding. So you will live in the riding effectively once those boundary redrawings happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your party's platform on immigration is to, quote, reduce overall levels and prioritize skilled immigrants. We actually heard some of these points raised earlier. We were hearing about the diversity of the population in this neighborhood and also some of the needs that aren't being met for folks. What does that mean to you? Why do you think that that's important, to reduce the levels and prioritize skilled immigrants?
If we reduce the levels, then we bring in the skilled immigrants we know they're going to have the skill set to strive in Canada. They're also going to be helping the Canadian economy. And then what we can do with the resources that we're not spending on bringing in families that don't have the skills or that we have to put through institutions, we can then just put that money into the communities. So like you said, at the community center you visited, we can put money into those to help people find homes, to help make sure people have rides, and overall helping the Canadian citizens that are here that are struggling.
We are going to hear actually from a voter coming up still on the show this morning that I also spoke with when I was visiting the neighborhood earlier in the week for the show, who said that they voted Conservative, but they wanted to vote for the People's Party. But they didn't vote for your party because they don't feel that you're going to have the same strong chance as the Conservatives. Why should a voter that is leaning or in that position choose your party over the Conservatives?
Because you're voting with your values. If you're voting with what you believe in, it's hard to put faith in it, but if you're actually voting in with what's in line with your value system, with what you believe, you have a better chance of, you're probably not the only one thinking that, oh, if I vote this way. People have just kind of put everything into a 3-horse system. You have the NDP, the Liberal, and the Conservative. And not a lot of people want to stray from that because, as they put it in the past, oh, that's vote splitting. But in Canada, there's no such thing as vote splitting. We're not taking the votes away from the Conservatives because they wouldn't have the votes. It also gives us the chance to get out there more.
So you don't see yourself as representing the same types of, as you put it, values as the Conservative Party represents. What makes your party distinct from them?
Our party actually wants to put Canadians first. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance and has the same rights. As I used to vote Conservative, I'm not going to lie. And as I got older, I realized that their values and what they were pushing through isn't the same. It changes every time we have a new leader in place. When I found the People's Party of Canada, our platform is the same as it was in 2018. It's going to be the same for 2025 election. It's going to be the same going forward because these are the values we believe in.
You were here listening to Amy, who, when I asked her why, she voted NDP, so you're not going to get her vote. But you still have to represent her if you're elected here. You would have to represent her. She self-identified and said that the other parties, and some of them have policies and such that don't represent her, and in fact, she feels like don't stand up for her rights as a queer person. Why would someone or someone else who is queer that lives in this riding feel confident if you were to represent them?
Because I don't care about your orientation. That doesn't apply. I don't care about if you identify as queer, if you're straight, if you're anything. I'm representing you as a person. Your gender or what you base yourself off of isn't who you are.
Why do you think that some people in the queer community may have the impression that your party doesn't represent them?
There's been a lot of negative information put out there. There have been people that have shown up to rallies that say they're representing us, but they're not. Because I've had it at the door as well that we're very, we don't represent a lot of the community, which is actually false. We do. We believe in a lot of the same guidelines. We want everybody to have a safe place, and that's our main goal.
You do draw the line on some of the gender-affirming surgeries, though, right? In your platform?
We do, but the way we say we're not touching the children. So I think After 18, you are legal to vote. You're legal to consent to sex. If you feel that you're in the wrong body, go for it. There's nothing stopping you. I feel when we go after the children and we start giving them all the hormone blockers, when we have research that has proven puberty is needed for our bodies to finish developing. If you ask any woman, they're going to say, no, I didn't enjoy going through puberty.
So you have worries at the younger ages.
Yeah.
Should that freedom be given? But isn't that an individual or an individual's family's right to decide what they want to do with their own bodies?
I'll ask you not to ask a question on a question. When you were 10, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I'm not being interviewed. So.
No, but the statement still stands. At a 10-year-old level or 12-year-old, you're not able to make those types of life-changing decisions. And as much as, yes, your parents can be supporting you, they can support you. You can go through, if you want to identify hypothetically as a boy, you can. Just let your body go through the natural stages.
It's 7:26. I know we have to go to sports, but I don't want to leave our conversation here before you make your pitch at the door. Like, if people have never met you, Sarah, tell us just like, who are you? If they've never met you and they want to know like who you are and why you should represent them in Elmwood-Transcona.
So who I am is I'm a parent. I'm putting it out there for. We can't just keep complaining that the system's not working for us. We actually have to be the change we want to see. Not to quote Gandhi or anything, but we actually have to strive to be better.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
That's Sarah Couture, the Elmwood-Transcona candidate for the People's Party of Canada. We have 5 of the 6 candidates that have agreed to be here this morning. The Conservatives did not respond to CBC's requests. You can read the full list online of all of the profile writing and the maps for this area. Scott Reguer has been waiting patiently with us to talk about sports and help us on the way for the Bombers, Scott.
Yeah, at quarterback Marcy, a day after we learned that Chris Strevler would be out long term after tearing 3 ligaments in his knee against the Riders, TSN's reporting that there is help on the way in the form of Jake Dolagala and Brian Scott. Dolagala, if you're not familiar with him, he is a behemoth, 6'7", 240 pounds plus, and he's plied most of his trade with the Riders over the years. So he's got some valuable experience, which is what the Bombers will be looking for behind Zach Collaros in their number 2 pivot. Brian Scott, he's an interesting guy. He's played a bit with the Argos when Chad Kelly came back. Scott, who completed every one of the passes he attempted this season, was made available. So those are the 2 names to know. If you follow the blue and gold, Jake Dolagala, Brian Scott, and the next game goes Saturday in Edmonton against the Elks.
There haven't been any bright spots for the Blue Jays this season, but one of them did come close to history last night.
Yeah, came close to history again. For the second time in his past 4 starts, Marcy Bowden-Francis found himself on the verge of a no-hitter. Facing the Mets last night and needing just 3 more outs, New York's star shortstop Francisco Lindor was at the plate.
A game the Mets desperately need. That's driven to deep right field, and a home run ends this no-hit bid. Linsanity!
A reference to former NBAer Jeremy Lin there, who plied his trade with Toronto and New York back in the day. Like Lin, Bowden-Francis has become a bit of a cult hero with what he's accomplished this season. A 28-year-old journeyman with a below-average fastball, Francis was the Majors' Pitcher of the Month in August, largely on the back of a near no-hitter against the Angels. Here's his manager, John Schneider.
I don't know how many other guys lose a no-hitter in the 9th on a homer twice in one season, but he's mature. He's really kind of wise beyond his years, and I think he will take a lot of positives out of this. And he'll probably laugh a little bit at the fact that he's lost 2, in the 9th inning on home runs. But I just can't speak enough to how he's evolved and how much he's taken from this opportunity. It's just been so cool to watch.
Only one Blue Jay has ever thrown a no-hitter. That was Dave Stieb 34 years ago. Stieb's gem came after 3 agonizing near misses in 9th innings, so maybe, Marcy, it's just a matter of time for Bowden-Francis. At least he's brought some good times for Jays fans in a season that's been bereft of them.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott.
You bet.
Scott Reger with Morning Sports. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're on location in Elmwood this morning. Current temperature is 16 degrees in Winnipeg. It's actually looks kind of mostly cloudy out our window here. We're at the Elm 163 Henderson Highway if you want to join us. Still ahead, we're going to talk to another voter here, a father of three, a small business owner in Transcona. And he says that anyone is going to be an improvement over Justin Trudeau. We're going to hear from him about why he feels that way. And then we're going to talk to the Liberal candidate who's running here in Elmwood-Transcona. So lots still ahead in our special broadcast. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 16 degrees, clearing this morning and getting windy and warm. We'll be 10 degrees warmer than seasonal, a high today of 29. A growing number of encampments in Winnipeg have many asking whether their presence in public spaces is even legal. Judges in several provinces have ruled the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms includes housing rights, even if that housing is an encampment. Teresa Bauer lives in a tiny tent near the Assiniboine River.
It's not easy to get on to find a place for some. Some have social anxiety, a lot of them have just scared to talk to workers and stuff. And a lot of people just need help. That's all we want, is to have a safe place.
While neighbors might complain the encampments break local bylaws on things like fires and sanitations, courts have found these bylaws are less important than people's constitutional right to life. Cities, including Winnipeg, are trying to mitigate those risks with things like mindful cleanups and fire and safety checks. You can read more about encampments on our website this morning. As well, you can hear more coming up in this next half hour right here on Information Radio. Winnipeg's plan to offer $40 million in subsidies to redevelop Portage Place Mall has garnered a range of reactions. The mayor is in support. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is skeptical. And a Winnipeg man who works in an office inside that downtown mall says he's just eager to see it improved. Paul Hagerman works for the nonprofit Canadian Food Grains Bank.
Those of us who are in there as tenants are finding that maintenance is suffering a little bit. And so we're looking for new investment for the mall. Even if we don't get to stay, that would be fine.
City Council votes on the subsidies this month. Winnipeg police are asking for your help finding a missing 22-year-old man. Zayed Shamo was last seen Monday evening in Bridgewater. Police say Shamo was driving a black 2018 Honda Civic Touring with Manitoba plates LLN 113. Police are concerned for his well-being. Now, Shamo is described as being 5'8", 185 pounds, medium build. He has brown hair, green eyes, and a beard. We do have his photo up on our website this morning. If you've seen him, call police. A nonprofit turning a southwest Winnipeg home into an addiction center says it is willing to answer any questions from the public. Regenesis Center plans for a temporary facility in Lindenwoods, and those plans will go ahead after a split vote at City Council yesterday. Dozens of people from the area sent letters saying they had not been properly consulted and they worry about safety. Executive Director Cindy Foster says Regenesis clients won't present any risk.
They have been mischaracterized and stigmatized, especially if they belong to the 2S LGBTQI+ community. We also service the BIPOC and disabled community as well. Our relatives deserve to be treated with respect and compassion as much as anybody else.
Foster says the 6 people who will live at the center will have already gone through addictions treatment. A former Manitoba teacher has been sentenced to 33 months after police found what a judge called horrific child pornography in his home. Alan Venice was sentenced in July for possessing child pornography, a year after police found thousands of the images on his computer, phone, and USB drives. Court heard police previously let Venice off with a warning when they found child pornography on his computer in 2009 after he had taken his computer in for repairs. Monique St. Germain at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection doesn't think he would just get a warning if that were to happen today.
We'd like to think that, if a similar situation were to arise in 2024, there might be a very different response.
Venice was ordered to submit a DNA sample and register as a sex offender for 20 years. People forced out of Bunabonabee Cree Nation have now returned home. Thousands had to flee the northern Manitoba community last month because of the threat of a growing wildfire. Stacey Robinson and her family stayed in Winnipeg for just over 2 weeks. Even though evacuees were given constant updates, Robinson says she never stopped worrying about what she had to leave behind.
Being away from home was really overwhelming. Like, it's a beautiful community. I'm pretty sure a lot of people felt the same, how they wanted to come home to their community. It was overwhelming.
5 other First Nation communities in northern Manitoba were evacuated this summer because of wildfires. The Red Cross says all those evacuees have also now returned home. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, we've got democracy in action now. Candidates are sticking around and eating together and having coffee here at the Elm Cafe at 163 Henderson Highway. It's our community studio this morning as we explore the issues in this neighborhood, also people's love of why they live here, and in the upcoming by-election, of course, coming up next week. Right now, let's get into your morning with weather and traffic. Abby has those details. Hi, Abby.
It's going to be mostly clear skies across the province today. We're going to see highs ranging from 18 to 29, breezy conditions in many of the areas, and cooler temperatures tonight with a chance of showers. Right now, Winnipeg, 16 degrees, and we are heading to a high of 29.
Traffic's pretty quiet.
788-3093, that's the number to call.
All right, that would mean that it is pretty quiet. Thank you, Abby. Well, September 16th is the date for the by-election here on Elmwood-Transcona. The choice will be to replace a seat left vacant by MP Daniel Blakey, who's gone to work with the province. He resigned in March. He represented this riding for the NDP for 8.5 years. Now, the NDP has won 10 of 11 federal elections in this area since the electoral district was formed in 1988. The Conservatives did win once in 2011. 6 candidates are running to represent the people here. CBC sent invitations to all 6 of the candidates. 5 of the 6 agreed to be interviewed here live. We have not heard at all anything from the Conservative Party of Canada candidate. We reached out to him. My producer did. I did. We called. We wrote multiple, and we heard nothing back from his campaign. But next, we're about to hear from the Liberals. First, though, let's hear from a voter. A voter I worked with who is a father of 3, and he says that he thinks any other party will be an improvement over the way Justin Trudeau has been running the country. I spoke with him Tuesday outside the Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal Corporation. Here's part of our conversation. I understand you are a business owner in Transcona. What's your full name?
Jace Richard, and the business is JLR Jewelers.
So Transcona is actually a little bit of a hike from here. This is a huge riding when you think about it, politically. But you're here at the Chalmers Centre. What brings you here?
The play group and the events that they provide over here. I have a young family, and they've been really good with having just different opportunities for the kids to engage in.
How old are the kids?
9 months old, 5 years old, and 6 years old.
Oh boy, busy household.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Drinking coffee right now because not a lot of sleep going on.
We're sitting out here, actually outside the centre on a bench, enjoying the day. For you and for your life as a Manitoban, what are the things that are great about living in Transcona, raising your family, doing business?
You know, it's funny. When I grew up in St. Vital, and we had this vision of Transcona as the place that you don't go. It was just, it had its own stigma to it until I actually went out there and started working out there and engaging with people there. And I think it's probably one of the nicest neighborhoods that I've ever found anywhere in any city. It's very hardworking people, blue-collar neighborhood, no pretentious people out here. It's literally salt of the earth. So we're actually hoping to move out and live in that area at some point.
What are the challenges that you face in your life as a Manitoban that governments, federally especially, might be able to help you with?
As a business owner, there's an issue because I cannot really raise my own wages. If I do that, I'm affecting every one of my clients around me because I'm raising my prices. I'm just putting the inflation and passing it on to them. So trying to find a balance of still being able to feed my kids without taking the money out of somebody else's pocket to feed their kids, that's been a challenge.
What are some of the issues that are, can affect your daily life in Elmwood here?
Crime, definitely, number one. Beyond the economy, my only concern around here is crime. I moved out here to start. We used to live in the West End, and it's a beautiful part of the city, but we did have a high crime rate out there. And so my wife and I moved out here when we got pregnant and wanted to start our family out here where we thought it would be safer. But unfortunately, there's been such a high level of street crime going on that I don't feel safe to let my kids out after dark around here. So,
how long have you lived here, and when did you stop letting the kids go out?
6 years we've lived here, and it probably wasn't too long after the first year or two that we started to notice. We get almost daily reports of people going down back lanes, poking into yards. That happens everywhere. But we also get reports of people dragging machetes around, of people getting beaten.
How challenging is it to live in a neighborhood that has some realities, but also some stigma to it, and you're just here like living your life with your family and wanting to be better? You know what I mean?
I don't know if it's challenging to say. It's just disappointing. We got a little house together, a little dream house to start off. It's just a small thing, but you have your kids, and everybody wants that white picket fence, and you want to feel safe. And that's the biggest thing, to feel safe both economically, where you're able to feed your kids and put them to sleep at night, and to feel safe that nobody's coming through your front door, which we had the first year that we lived here. We had a home invasion within our first 6 months of being here, and we had to alarm up and camera up everywhere that we go. So that is a reality, and I don't think anybody should have to live through that.
You're talking about different levels of government. Of course, it's a multi-layer problem because people will start to talk about, people that are struggling. Why are they on the street? What's going on with housing? But then other people will also say it's the justice system that needs bigger reforms. Yeah. So I'm just wondering where you see solutions when you think about, what you might like to be addressed.
Justice solution, definitely. I can't tell you how many times myself and anyone I talk to gets irritated when we read a police report and see released as mandated. When somebody's been caught. I know there's not enough space to detain everyone, but there has to be some sort of reform for that.
Do you change your vote party to party? Does it depend on the election and the issues, or you sort of have a party you always vote for?
I don't vote based on party, but it seems that certain parties are usually more aligned with my views and my concerns. So if some candidate comes along with the solutions for the issues that I see facing, they can swing my vote any day.
Where do you lean usually?
Oh, I lean more to the right. I'm more a conservative person. It's just my lifestyle and what I appreciate.
Do you have hopes for what the outcome might be this time around, or?
I have hopes for who won't be in office this time around federally. As for who will be, I think anything is going to be an improvement. That's just a personal opinion.
Now, are you talking about the Liberals now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the Liberal or the leader of the Liberal Party, yeah. So.
Where did he let you down, or from the beginning were you not a fan of Justin Trudeau?
I wasn't a huge fan, but I was hopeful, and then it seemed to be just a campaign of apologetics and without any actual action. I've seen enough tears and crying and I'm sorries, and I'd like to see things actually get done.
So that is Elmwood resident and follower 3, Jace Richard. He will vote here in Elmwood-Transcona in the by-election next week. And let's turn to the Liberal candidate now. Ian McIntyre is running here in the by-election and is with us live at the Elm this morning. Hello to you.
Hello, welcome.
So we just heard Jace's opinion of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and we know the Angus Reid poll came out recently, says 2/3 of Canadians have a negative opinion of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. How do you respond when you hear those concerns at the door?
Mr. Trudeau is my leader. Mr. Trudeau is our leader. I'm very grateful for Mr. Trudeau coming to Elmwood-Transcona and campaigning with me. It was a generous conversation that we had, and the number and the people that he meets individually. People are excited to meet him, and people feel listened to. They are engaged in conversation with him, and I think if every Canadian had the opportunity to meet one-on-one with Mr. Trudeau, they would have a better opinion. But that's not the only opinion that I'm hearing at the door. I'm hearing, that he's done a great job, and we really like him. And they're also saying that there's a particular leader that they don't like, and that they're not going to vote, particularly Conservative.
Why are you running here? You've been a teacher in this area for quite a long time. Tell listeners and voters, by extension, who might be listening, a little bit more about yourself, Ian McIntyre.
I am a retired teacher. I was a teacher for 38 years. 25 of those years were with River East Transcona School Division. I worked both in the Transcona side and in the Kildonan, the Kildonan area. Never in Elmwood. That's part of the Winnipeg School Division, and I work with a board that that finds housing and supports and jobs for adults with cognitive disabilities.
And getting into politics, why?
Well, I ran in the provincial election in October, and this particular election, Elmwood-Transcona, is the perfect opportunity for me to step forward. I really like the direction and many of the initiatives that the Liberal Party has put forward. I've been Liberal all my life. I particularly like, in the new year, free insulin. It's been 100 years since Dr. Banting discovered insulin, sold the patent to the University of Toronto for $1, and many people are going to benefit from free insulin when it comes to fruition.
Some people here feel let down by the Liberals, and this has not been a Liberal riding. So this riding in Elmwood-Transcona has been around since '88. People have sent the NDP or the Conservatives in one term to Ottawa, never a Liberal. How would you convince a voter to give your party their confidence this time around, especially those that feel like they haven't been heard at the federal level and haven't been supporting the Liberals? Some people point to Liberals' bail reform as contributing to some of the crime problems by letting repeat offenders out on bail. We just heard Jace with that concern. The Winnipeg Police Service has often cited that as an issue as well. So what do you say to someone in this area who has not supported the Liberals and on crime, which has come up repeatedly this morning as being an issue in Elmwood-Transcona, that they actually blame the Liberal policies and they don't trust your party?
It's easy to blame the party, and of course Mr. Trudeau is the face and voice of the party, so it's easy to blame him for all of that. We are not going to legislate crime away. It's just not going to happen. But in terms of putting initiatives in place in order to support the area, new housing, the housing plans that we put forward, building people up and picking them up out of poverty. 600,000 children lifted out of poverty from the monthly child benefit that's coming to homes, have lifted kids out of poverty, and that's excellent. I'm offering a seat at the table with the government, which the people of Elmwood-Transcona have not had. And so this is an opportunity to send someone who's going to be sitting at the table and being involved in that decision making.
These conversations are all 5 minutes, and man, it flies by.
It does.
Good luck on the 16th. Thank you very much for being with us.
I really appreciate this. This is fantastic, Marcy.
Thank you for being with us. Ian McIntyre has been the fourth candidate we've had on the air this morning. Ian represents the Liberal Party. He's the candidate for the riding of Elmwood-Transcona. You can read more on their platform websites. The by-election is coming up on Monday, so it's coming up, the by-election's coming up on the 16th. Right now, it is 7:47 a.m. You're listening to a special edition of Information Radio. We're in Community Live. I like to call it our community studio here at the Elm. So we're eating great cookies that apparently represent the diversity of the neighborhood. We've got cookies from Mexico, Philippines, El Salvador, and they've got a special breakfast here. Thanks to Elman Montoya, who's in the kitchen, and welcome to CBC here today. We do need to move to the news of the day next. And the news of the day, the story that's coming up next, ties right into some of the things we've been hearing this morning about concerns with homelessness here in Elmwood. Where are people going to live? Now, if you have visited Winnipeg's parks or river trails lately, you've probably noticed encampments. They're all over the place. Here in Elmwood, people talk about under the bridges, Roxy Park. There's a number of different places that encampments are popping up. Tents overall are in public spaces all over Winnipeg. They're across the country. A lot of people are asking, is it legal for them to be there? Our reporter Emily Brass dug into the question. We spoke in detail yesterday.
Hi, Marcy.
So let's start with the question, is it legal for people to set up encampments and then stay indefinitely in parks and other public spaces as well?
Well, it sounds like such a simple question, right? But the answer is much more complicated than we thought. Canada's legal framework on encampments and homelessness is still very much evolving. But there are some ground rules being established through the courts in other parts of the country. Canada also has obligations through its international human rights agreements and in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We'll get to those in a minute, but let's start by meeting someone dealing with homelessness firsthand. Teresa Bauer lives in a tiny tent near the Assiniboine River, and she invited us to see her little home, even though she was exhausted after being harassed in the encampment the night before.
I have my bed and my blankets and my pillow. It's cozy.
It's cozy?
Yeah.
How do you feel about your home here?
It's kind of shitty because it's kind of shitty. I'd like my own place.
And Teresa says outreach workers have talked to her about finding a home, but it hasn't happened yet.
Now, meantime, there's some people who live nearby that are taking action to get her encampment and some others moved out. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Teresa Hunter lives downtown near some encampments on the Assiniboine River. Hunter says she's contacted the city hundreds of times about fires, garbage, and aggressive behavior, and she alleges several in the neighborhood have been threatened and assaulted by people living in the encampments.
My husband being one of them. Somebody asked him for a light. He didn't have one, and so he had a hatchet waved at him, and that was right on the river trail, right not far from here. So yeah, we're getting really tired, and we are really pressing the city to do something, and do something more beyond than allowing people to live in camps. People need to have shelter, and they need to be supported.
And of course, Hunter's far from alone in that opinion. A recent Probe research poll found about half of Winnipeggers surveyed don't think people experiencing homelessness should be allowed to stay in encampments as long as they like.
But what happens then if there's nowhere for people to go?
Well, that's what's happening with Teresa Bauer, who's still waiting for a place to live. She says she's been living mainly on the streets since she was 12 years old. And that's when she escaped an abusive foster home. And many years later, she found her brother, her sister, her aunt here in Winnipeg, and they all lived together in that encampment. She says that connection is essential, even if she found a home.
I'd probably still come out here anyways.
Why?
Because I have family out here.
So for Teresa, one of the stipulations for moving into housing might be living near her family. And this type of need falls under a legal premise called adequate or accessible housing. That's a fundamental part of a new framework guiding Canada's response to homelessness. Homes must support each individual's needs. That can range from a home that allows pets to one where you can use drugs to one where your family members are nearby. Experts say finding homeless people accessible housing improves their chances of staying housed, and it's gradually becoming the law.
Can we get more information on some of the terms you use, like adequate and accessible housing? What does it actually mean?
Well, you've probably heard local outreach groups talking about taking a human rights approach to dealing with homelessness. Well, that stems from some of the frameworks that are meant to protect people's rights, including people who are unhoused. At the international level, housing was recognized as part of the right to an adequate standard of living in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to which Canada agreed to be bound. At the federal level, the National Housing Strategy was enacted in 2019, recognizing housing as a human right. And judges in several provinces have ruled that Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which protects the right to life, liberty, and security of person, includes housing rights, even if that housing is an encampment. Here's the federal housing advocate, Marie-Josée Houle.
So what is the definition of adequate housing? People need to have security of tenure. It needs to be habitable. For Indigenous folks, it needs to be culturally relevant. It needs to be in a location close to services and things that people need. And it needs to be safe. So we know that encampments are not the solution. The answer to encampments is adequate housing. So until there is adequate housing available for them, governments need to recognize they've got to respect the basic human rights of people. So meaning that they have an obligation to provide safe drinking water, for example, a place to cook, a place to keep warm, a place to cool down.
So that brings us to what's happening at the municipal level. And in 2008, the BC Supreme Court set precedent by laying out two key criteria that must be met before an encampment can be evicted, requirements UBC law professor Alex Flynn knows well.
Number one is that it applies at night, and that's because the court noted that sleeping is a basic human right that's essential for life, liberty, and security of the person. And then the second is that the shelter spaces have to be accessible, and there have to be enough of them to accommodate the people who would be evicted.
So that leaves cities having to prove in court the people they want to evict would have accessible housing appropriate to meet their needs. For example, an Ontario Superior Court judge in Kingston recently determined one encampment's proximity to a service hub and to a supervised consumption site was essential to the people who lived there, so they could not be immediately moved.
How are those precedents that you're talking about playing out in Winnipeg?
Well, in Winnipeg, the city only only evicts encampments that are on private property or are causing an immediate risk to safety. That has a lot of neighbors like Teresa Hunter, who we heard from earlier, complaining about the encampments. They say the camps keep them from visiting parks, and many point out the encampments often break municipal bylaws on things like fires and sanitation. But the courts have found those local bylaws are less critical than the campers' constitutional right to life.
They're subject to all sorts of health effects and possibly death from not being able to sleep. So we can't weigh the people who are using the park for leisure the same as people whose lives are at risk. We have to weigh the people whose lives are at risk higher.
So instead of enforcing the bylaws, some cities, including Winnipeg, are stepping up to mitigate the risks those bylaws are meant to prevent. So firefighters and police are doing regular check-ins, and the Downtown Community Safety Partnership launched a program this spring called Mindful Cleanups. I've been visiting encampments for the story, and that's where I met Siam Singh, who leads the Clean Slate team for DCSP.
We don't interfere into their privacy or anything. We try to just come over here, give them some donations, give them some garbage bag. That gives them motivation to clean up their space. And that's the way we can build a relationship with them. If they need any resources, we can touch base with them, come down here, do a wellness check up on them.
And of course, they hope these relationships ultimately help outreach workers connect people with housing.
But what about that housing? What's the province doing about that?
Well, Manitoba's Minister of Housing, Addictions and Homelessness says the NDP government has housed over 1,000 people since last November, 625 of whom were homeless. Bernadette Smith says she's seen what can happen when housing doesn't address people's needs. So the province is working on building more units that are supportive and barrier-free.
People were being housed. I would go to a shelter. They would be housed. I would come back 6 months later and see that same person. And I would often ask them, why are you back at the shelter? And they would say, well, they didn't have the supports that they needed to be successfully housed.
So for Winnipeggers like Teresa Bauer, who lives in that tiny tent along the river, a home that takes her specific needs into account would be life-changing.
It's not easy to find a place for some. Some have social anxiety, a lot of them have just scared to talk to workers and stuff. And a lot of people just need help. That's all we want, is to have a safe place.
So Bauer said, and still, until a safe place is found, she'll keep staying in encampments, and the law will continue to protect her right to do that and others across the country.
Thank you very much for this, Emily.
Thank you.
Emily Brass, reporter with CBC Manitoba. You can find more in her story at cbc.ca/Manitoba. I spoke with her in our CBC studio yesterday about her special report on encampments. If you want to weigh in, we're going to continue looking at this and where we go from here. And one of the things we're going to be doing is looking at, once again, at what other cities are doing and innovative solutions in the meantime, because there is not enough housing. So what do? We need spaces for people to sleep. So stay tuned. We're going to have ongoing coverage on our program in the days ahead. Right now it's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock, and I'm live in Elmwood this morning. It looks like the sun's trying to make an appearance. It's a little bit windy out there as well. I'm looking through the window at 163 Henderson Highway. This is the Elm restaurant, and folks around me having some breakfast. Their specialties are El Salvadorian here at the Elm. I'll just get into the weather, traffic, then we'll get into headlines. So traffic has been pretty good this morning, actually. I have no new notes, except this one. Mo called to say there's a stalled car westbound Notre Dame and King Edward, so that's blocking the middle lane. No hazards on, so be careful there, westbound Notre Dame, King Edward. 788-3093 if you want to reach the traffic line. Weather-wise, it is 16 degrees, and we're going to head to a high of 29 today with Humidex 34, and as I mentioned, those winds are going to stay gusty like they are right now. Heather Wells is here with headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a nonprofit turning a Southwest Winnipeg home into an addiction center says it is willing to answer any questions from the public. Regenesis Center's plans for a temporary facility in Lindenwoods will go ahead after a split vote at City Council yesterday. Winnipeg police are asking for your help finding a missing 22-year-old man. Zayad Shamo was last seen Monday evening in Bridgewater. Police say Shamo was driving a black 2018 Honda Civic Touring with Manitoba plates LLN113, and police say they're concerned for his well-being. We do have his photo up on our website. If you see him, call police. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, we're here because of the Elmwood-Transcona by-election, and this riding has gone NDP in every election except one when it went Conservative. The NDP candidate who is running in the by-election will join us live after 8 o'clock right here on CBC. We're also going to hear from another voter who says she voted Conservative.
Today on Q.
I'm Talia Schlenger sitting in for Tom Power. There's a new Tragically Hip documentary that chronicles the band's rise from early days playing in bars to filling stadiums in Canada. You'll hear from filmmaker Mike Downey and members of the band about never-seen-before footage.
There was anger and frustration and resentment, and then Gord got his diagnosis.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Haida Gwaii is known for hand-carved canoes. And the week we were there, a beautiful 15-meter-long one was about to launch. The carver Christian White on how he makes the crafts and the meaning of his work in Haida culture coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young.
We all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
And that was the moment billionaire Jared Isaacman emerged into space. He is part of the SpaceX Polaris Dawn crew performing the first civilian privately funded spacewalk this morning. My co-host John Northcott is covering the story. And John, what more can you tell us?
Marcia, it's called an EVA, extravehicular activity. And it worked. The first to venture out, Jared Isaacman, the billionaire pilot and astronaut, he opened the hatch and stood in the open portal testing the new spacesuits that are at the heart of this mission. He was followed by SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis. It was the first commercial spacewalk, 4 astronauts on board the SpaceX vehicle in total. But since the Dragon has no airlocks, all of them were exposed to the potential dangers of the void of space.
So, John, how safe or unsafe was this spacewalk?
Marcia, in the history of space flight, fatalities have occurred during launches, but leaving the relative safety of the spacecraft has always had its risks. Here's former NASA astronaut Mike Hopkins.
One of the hardest parts about our training for spacewalks is what we call incapacitated crew. And so you need to always be able to get your crewmate back into the airlock if something should happen, if they should no longer be conscious.
The first spacewalking astronaut almost 60 years ago had his suit expand so much that he had to deflate it to get back inside. Over the ensuing years, there have been a number of potential spacewalk disasters, including one where a water leak caused an astronaut to almost drown in his suit. So the success of these suits today are a big step forward. Marcia, in one final note on this story, to steady themselves on the Dragon, the crew had a handrail dubbed Skywalker.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
My World Report co-host, John Northcott, in studio. The threat of an Air Canada pilot strike is causing concern on the East Coast. The deadline to reach a deal is still days away, but in Newfoundland and Labrador, it is already having an impact. Peter Cowan reports.
If you want to get to the island of Newfoundland, usually you have to take a flight, and more often than not, that means Air Canada. The airline flies more passengers in and out of St. John's than all the other airlines put together. Lori Best just flew in from Alberta. She's here to visit family, but already anxious about getting home.
It's quite worrisome because I'm here and how will I get back? It's a little far to walk.
She's not alone. Some travelers are calling hotels and tour companies to cancel rather than risk being stuck. Air Canada's pilots could go on strike just after midnight on September 18th. But the airline warns flights could be disrupted as early as the weekend. Steve Crocker is Newfoundland and Labrador's tourism minister. He says even a short disruption could have a big impact.
Quite frankly, it's already being impacted by this. We've lost bookings. We hear from operators now, pretty much hourly that people are canceling, the uncertainty.
I travel every single week for work.
Then there are the business travelers like Nicole Neary. She's a software consultant who lives outside St. John's but visits clients all over North America.
Next week I'm supposed to be in Trinidad, and it's something that's been booked for a long time, and it would cause a lot of issues to reschedule. I mean, that's a big trip.
Her hope Air Canada makes a deal with its pilots so travel for her and hundreds of thousands like her isn't disrupted. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
In northern Gaza, the Palestinian news agency Wafa is reporting Israel's military has launched more airstrikes at displacement camps. It comes amid international condemnation of yesterday's attack on a central Gaza school. It was being used to shelter 12,000 displaced Palestinians. Sasha Petrusek is in Jerusalem with that reaction.
Survivors sift through the shattered school, pulling out broken bicycles, shoes, and toys as Lugna Genwa recounts the double airstrike that hit her shelter. We woke up with rubble on top of us, she says. When we went downstairs, many dead and in bad shape. The injured were rushed to hospital in central Gaza. Health officials say at least 18 people died in Wednesday's attack on the school, operated as a crowded refugee center by UNRWA. That's the UN's main agency helping Palestinians, and UN officials say 6 of its aid workers are among the dead, the highest number in any single strike. Israel says it was targeting a Hamas control center operating among civilians.
What's happening in Gaza is totally unacceptable.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres blames both sides for Gaza's high casualties.
Very dramatic violations of international humanitarian law and the total absence of an effective protection of civilians.
This is the 5th time this school has been targeted by Israel as its military operations continue throughout Gaza. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
The World Health Organization says it has evacuated nearly 100 people from Gaza to the United Arab Emirates. That is the largest medical evacuation yet in this war. But the WHO says Gaza still needs medical corridors to be created. It says there are more than 10,000 people who still need to leave the territory for medical treatment. People in Chiang Rai, Thailand, wade through waist-deep waters this morning. Special forces have been called in to rescue residents from the flooding. They are leaving in boats and in helicopters. Rain brought on by Typhoon Yagi caused this most recent flooding, but the Thai government says rain in northern provinces over the past month has resulted in landslides and at least 33 deaths. Britain's National Health Service is in critical condition. A 9-week review of the system points to crumbling buildings and long wait times. And today, people in the UK will learn what their government plans to do. Crystal Gamansing has more on the problems and the prescription.
An awful state. That's the label Dr. Ara Darzi put on emergency care in the UK after the House of Lords member conducted his review. But
the vital signs are stable.
Darzi's comprehensive report points to past austerity measures as starving the system, leading to crumbling buildings. 7.6 million people are sitting on wait lists for care, partly because of the pandemic and treatment cancellations.
We just need to put the right investment in the NHS. We need to engage our amazing doctors, nurses, community.
Fixing it is a priority, says the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting.
By the end of this Parliament, we see waiting lists millions lower than they are today.
The answer isn't more money or doctors, says John Bell, a Canadian-British physician who often consults with governments.
We have to move things to the community, try and keep things out of hospital wherever we can, and use a whole range of innovations to do that.
The UK says it has a 10-year plan to restore the NHS back to health. Details are still to come. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Wildlife officers in Yellowknife are trying to track down a dangerous wolf. It attacked a hiker this weekend on a trail just outside the city. As Shannon Scott tells us, officials are still trying to understand why it acted that way.
This animal was not acting like a normal wild wolf.
Territorial veterinarian Nema Jutha says, while wolves aren't uncommon in and around Yellowknife, what happened on Sunday sure was. A hiker was attacked by a lone wolf on the popular Rainy Hill Trail, about a 15-minute drive from downtown Yellowknife. Normally a busy area, now the trailhead is closed. Jutha is part of the team working on figuring out why the wolf approached a hiker and their dog on Sunday, an incident that ultimately led to what Jutha calls a significant bite.
It was a bite but didn't shred any tissue or anything like that, so there were punctures.
Sadie Parr has been studying wolves for more than 15 years. She says they're generally shy animals, and encounters with humans are very rare. But she says wolves can become accustomed to humans. which can make run-ins more dangerous.
Is the animal being fed? Because some people do do that, believe it or not, or even indirectly through accessing garbage or camp foods or pet foods that are left outside.
Resource officers continue to investigate the incident. They've even been using a drone to fly over the area. One wolf has been found and killed, but it will take time before we know if it's the wolf in question. A second wolf has also been spotted. The trail, meanwhile, remains closed, and people are being asked to stay away from the area for now. Shannon Scott, CBC News, Yellowknife.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Hi, I'm Amy, and you're listening to CBC Live in Elmwood-Transcona.
Yes, you are. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We are at the Elm this morning, 163 Henderson Highway, covering the upcoming Elmwood-Transcona by-election. So voters are going to go to the polls here next week, and we have been talking to the candidates who want to run. Daniel Blakey served this community for the NDP for many, many years. In fact, this riding's always gone NDP with the exception of one election where it went Conservative. This morning, we've had 5 of 6 candidates on. The only one not represented is the Conservative Party of Canada candidate, Colin Reynolds. We tried to reach out to him multiple times, and his team did not respond to CBC's request. This half hour, we will hear from the NDP candidate running here. Now that the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, has torn up the confidence and supply deal with the federal Liberal Party, how does that impact the local NDP candidate running here? Our questions coming up at the door. We're going to have a chance to find out when we talk to her. Also this half hour in the program, we're going to meet Melissa Brown. She is a 31-year-old Elmwood resident. She's a mother of 2. I met her earlier this week to learn more about her life here in the neighborhood. She has already voted, so we're going to hear why she was motivated to go to the polls in the advanced polling, which just closed earlier this week. So we'll see what issues were on the table for her family. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who is joining us with our news headlines for your Thursday morning.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's plan to offer $40 million in subsidies to redevelop Portage Place Mall is generating a range of reaction. The mayor supports it. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is skeptical. And a Winnipeg man who works in an office inside that downtown mall says he's just eager to see it improved. We'll hear more about that. Also, the number of homeless encampments is growing in Winnipeg and right across the country. And it's creating tension with some who live nearby, raising questions about whether the encampments are even legal. We're going to look into that question coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, I can see out the window, Abby, there's a lot of trees because actually it's the cemetery that's right across the street from where we are, right? Base of the Disraeli Bridge, base of the Redwood Bridge, so you can see the Elmwood Cemetery. And I'm looking at all these big trees there, and they're just really moving in the wind. So I'm suspecting winds are picking up a lot.
Yeah, it will be picking up as we get to the noon period. We're expecting some clear skies once these cloudy conditions are clear off as we get deep into the morning. It's going to be breezy by the noon period. We'll warm up to 29 in the city. It's going to feel warmer with the humidity factored in, and we're going to be 10 degrees warmer than seasonal. The normals for this time of the year is 19, but we warm up to 29 today. Currently, Winnipeg, we are at 17 degrees, and we see clear skies tonight. Thompson is seeing shallow fog at 3 degrees, and it's mainly sunny in Churchill. All the way down south, we're seeing cloudy conditions in most of the regions, with temperatures hovering between 15 and 19. Traffic, that's stalled traffic still blocking the westbound middle lane, so you need to use caution at Notre Dame and King Edwards. Expect some minor delays along that axis. Abinoji-Mikena, Pembina Highway to St. Anne's. Also, there's the eastbound curb lane is being walked in. So if you're going right, turn yield lane is closed for street construction. That's all you get. 788-3093. That's the traffic update
Abby?
for now. Yep.
I'm just going to interject here. I'm just getting information that maybe just now the stalled car on Notre Dame was cleared. Is that right?
Oh, let me just hit my refresh.
Yeah, let's just check here and make sure, because I know we're getting the thicker rush hour when things change really quickly here. So
refreshing my screen now. Yes, there's an update, and stall vehicle clear. All lanes open now.
Good news. 788-3093. 8:14 is the time right now. Well, next on our special show covering the upcoming by-election here in Elmwood-Transcona, we want to introduce you to someone who already voted, and that is because there were advanced polls this week. Turnout was a touch higher than in a very closely watched by-election that happened in Toronto, which the NDP actually lost, and that was seen as a surprise. So here in Elmwood-Transcona, the turnout for the advanced polls was about 10,000 people voting, 14% of the eligible electorate. One of the people that voted I met earlier this week, literally at, as you'll hear, ground level, on the ground, when I visited Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal Corporation. I am sitting on a little playmat, and I'm surrounded by parents and children, caregivers, little ones crawling around. Who's this little patootie over here?
This is Erica. That's my 2-year-old daughter.
Beautiful. And what's your full name?
Melissa Brown. I live in Elmwood. I think 11 years now.
What brings you here?
It's a free drop-in program. So we come most Tuesday and Thursday mornings.
So there's an election, obviously, a by-election, I should say, here in Elmwood-Transcona. You're a voter. What would you like politicians to understand about your life and the great things about Elmwood, but also maybe some of the struggles about living in this neighborhood that you wish that they would tend to?
One thing I like about the neighborhood is it seems pretty community-based. I like that the neighborhood does lots of community activities where they do little festivals. But one thing I think that maybe politicians need to know more about is there's a lot more crime happening in the area. I see on neighborhood pages all the time people complaining that their stuff is constantly getting stolen or vandalized.
Have you had that happen in your life as well?
Oh yeah. Just within the past month, I've had my lawnmower stolen, a weed whacker stolen, a stroller stolen, and what else? We had an air conditioning that gets put in your window stolen. It was taken out and put in the backyard just temporarily, but someone came into the fenced backyard and just helped themselves to it. So in the past month, we've probably had close to, let's say, if you buy it all secondhand, it's got to be at least $1,000 worth of stuff stolen in a month.
What's that like for your bottom line? And then also, what's the theft part like for your sense of safety at home?
Well, yeah, we definitely can't leave stuff lying out overnight, which is a little bit tricky training my children not to leave their stuff lying around. And it's sad to teach them because someone's going to take your stuff and mistreat you. We're seeing a lot more people coming off of the Disraeli Bridge who are clearly struggling with some sort of substance abuse problem. And they're often in states where they're clearly not in full control of themselves. So that can be scary. On the weekend, our family was sitting out in our backyard. The children were jumping on the trampoline. We were having a bonfire, my husband and I, and we had to go inside because someone in the back lane was having a meltdown of sorts. So we felt we should take the children inside.
What do you feel in that moment?
Honestly, I just feel frustration because I personally think the government in general is failing a lot of people. I strongly disagree with safe injection sites, and that's just because I come from a family where people are either recovered addicts or they've unfortunately passed away from overdoses. I think it's a form of enabling.
Will that inform your vote?
I've actually already voted in the advanced polls.
Who'd you vote for?
I always vote conservative, and not just out of habit. Every time I look at the platforms, I make a pro and con list, and it's just the Conservative Party most aligns with my values. Honestly, I actually agree more with the PPC. So I guess some people might call me a right-winger, although that's made-up language. I just voted Conservative because I think they have a far better chance than the PPC. Hasn't grown big enough yet, but I do agree with a lot of their policies.
Which ones do you like that you think would improve your life here in Elmwood?
Now, without trying to sound horrible to some people, I personally think that we're accepting way too many newcomers into the country, and not because I'm against newcomers coming to the country at all. It's just that I think we should be accepting them at a rate where they can climatize or adjust to culture, and which is fine to adapt. Culture is fine to adapt. That's what culture is about, but without overwhelming everyone involved. And I mean, we're experiencing a pretty horrible housing crisis right now. We actually just bought a house this summer, a new house. It took us 5 years to find a house, 1 that we liked, and 2 that we could afford, and 3 that we didn't get outbidded on. So there's so many people coming all the time that I don't even think it's fair to them to just cram everyone into all these spaces and then not have all the adequate resources for everyone. And then I don't agree with safe injection sites. I don't agree with it being legally allowed to be intoxicated of any kind out in public. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not allowed to openly drink, and yet there's people smoking meth on the street, like, openly. Mm-hmm. And my kids see that. You know, I used to work downtown for 9 years, and as an early childhood educator. And we would take the kids to the parks all the time. My daughter would come to work with me. She attended the same daycare. Every time we have to check the park for needles, for blades taped to the slides, or just little like baggies of substances laying in the rocks or the wood chips. And one time I took my daughter to a park outside of the city, and I allowed her for the first time to run around without shoes on because I trusted that there wasn't going to be drug needles.
You want safer spaces.
Yes, I want safer spaces for everyone. Like, it's not safe for them either. And so I think having a heart for people who are hurting means providing a lot better spaces for them.
Thank you very much for sharing your views with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's Melissa Brown. She's 31 years old. She lives here in Elmwood. She's a mother of 2. I met her earlier this week at the free drop-in program just up the way from where we are in Henderson Highway. The Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal Corporation has their space, and they run programs for seniors, and they deliver meals to people, and they do all kinds of different local programming. Well, let's talk to the final candidate to join us on our live broadcast this morning, who is running in next week's Elmwood-Transcona by-election, and that is NDP candidate Leila Dance, who's here live at the now busy cafe. Hello to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So there's a lot of things to respond to in what we just heard from Melissa, but I mean, in your view, you're running here. What do you think the biggest issue is right now facing people in Elmwood-Transcona?
So I've been door knocking for 14 weeks now, which has given me an opportunity to talk to a lot of people. So the 3 big ones that I'm hearing is cost of groceries, so cost of housing or rent, and then probably the final one is probably healthcare that I hear the most about. Those are probably the big 3. Not to say that I'm not hearing about some of the crime issues and stuff like that. Certainly not to diminish what she was saying. It just wasn't the top 3.
Yeah, I will actually revisit some of what she said in a moment, but you were talking about cost of groceries. Earlier this morning, we were hearing that there's some funding challenges. The people are wondering what, and effectively you're representing the party where the incumbent was NDP. They've lost some funding for programs. Like Chalmers used to deliver groceries, and they had transportation for people, and they said they've had to tell people, I can't transport you to your healthcare appointment because we lost some funding to take you there. They want to know if you were elected, would your party reinstate some of the funding that they have lost?
The reason why I chose to do this was community. I've had the opportunity in my life to work for with a lot of different community groups, and I understand the importance of it. It's the only reason why I'm here, is because I want to be able to bring federal dollars back into this riding to help those community programs, those services and stuff like that are essential, that people require to survive. Shouldn't require to survive, but actually are needing it. I belong to the Transcona Food Security Network. So every month we're getting together, we're talking about the lack of people's ability to purchase food, or the challenge that they're having where they're making that decision between food and their prescriptions, or paying their rent or buying food. Like, those types of things shouldn't be happening. So I think programs and in this neighborhood, Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal, the amount of programming me and a couple of the other candidates went to the Unity Walk, and we got a tour of the facility beforehand. All of the programming that they do is so essential to this community. So I want to continue to see those, as well as continue to help them expand those programming.
Would it be a priority for you, though, to look into having more sustainable annual funding so those programs can continue? Because the problem is they're having to do paperwork to apply for a whole bunch of mishmash of grants, and then they can't continue to provide things because they don't have that stability. Would that be a priority for you?
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen it. I come from... I did 16 years worth of nonprofit work, right? Working with different charities, knowing that you have to reapply and do those types of things, and waiting on that funding. If that funding, is it going to arrive? If it arrives, can we get other funding? Like, how do we make that? And then someone will say, well, if you've got other funding, we're not going to do this. And what does that funding look like, right? Does it account for operational expenses, right? Some of those things are the hardest to find funding for. So it'll definitely be looking and helping that. And I have that experience to be able to know and push for some of those things.
To Melissa, who voted already for the Conservatives here, but if you win, you have to represent her. She lives here, right? So she wants to know why you believe, she believes supervised consumption sites are not the answer. So let me just ask why your party believes that they are part of the answer when you look at the challenges facing people.
I think different people have different needs. Everybody needs to be met at the level that they're at. Do I think it's the only solution? No. Do I think that there's lots of other solutions that we need to look at as well? Certainly. I think if you try to put all your eggs in one basket, it's not going to work for any community. But I know that different people need different options. And so that option might work for some people, might not work for others. So I think it's really important that we continue to have a broad spectrum of stuff available for different people to meet them on the level that they're at.
Her concerns about immigration, she tied to resources following through people that come, and cited, a lack of spaces for people to live, and how that affects the people that come here, but also she was tying it together with hers. Your leader's been very clear, Jagmeet Singh, saying he thinks it's not right or responsible to tie those two issues together. What are your thoughts on immigration policies and how you view some of the pressures on housing here in Elmwood-Transcona?
Yeah, it's certainly something that people have talked about on the doorstep about the lack of housing or even the affordable rent. We've seen that over the years. So it's really about, I'm not opposed to bringing. We've got to welcome people who need and want to seek refuge here, but in the same aspect, we need to be able to provide, housing, social services, healthcare, places in schools. We need to make sure that we have all those in place as well, because we have to support everybody. Everybody in every way that they need.
Let's talk about the supply and confidence deal that got ripped up last week from Jagmeet Singh and the Liberals. What is your opinion on what your leader did?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we all know I wasn't part of the deal. I wasn't part of some of the decisions. I'm not part of caucus, so I wasn't part of the table and the discussions that went around it. I walked the picket line with Teamsters. I knew. And I came from a very union family with my dad and my brother. I knew the impact that the Trudeau government sending those workers back to work. If that is one of the reasons why we decided that, Justin wasn't holding up his end of the deal, then that is, I think, a good reason for it to rip it up. It's not going to change me personally. I'm going to vote every issue by issue. Vote by vote, and I'm just going to do what's in the best interest of my Canadians, but my riding, specifically Elmwood-Transcona.
Some of the Conservative advertising now has tried to paint the NDP and the Liberals with the same brush, looking at it as one party. What do you say to an NDP voter that actually might be worried that your party's identity has been lost or watered down because of having that agreement in the first place, confidence in supply? And now we're probably a year to an election, unless it gets called sooner, and that might affect how people view what you really stand for.
Yeah, it doesn't. I hope it doesn't change how people view me. My goal in this community is just to represent this community. I can show a long history of doing things for this community and in this community in different ways. I grew up in a very community-oriented family that just told me that I had to give back if I wanted to get anything out of my community, and I'll continue to do that. Politics aside, I guess, would be the way to look at it. I've been a politician literally for 5 months. This wasn't something I even considered.
So why are you running?
Yeah, And when I sat down, it took a couple of asks, I'll be honest with you. And when I sat down, my question was, what can I do for this community? I just want to leave a better space for my son, for my grandchildren in the very distant future, but also for the people around me, my neighbors. I'm from this, the impact that I will have an impact on me because I live in this community, and it's important for me to serve my community.
Thank you very much for being with us live here. Good luck next week in the by-election.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
That's Leila Dent. She's the NDP candidate for here in Elmwood-Transcona. And so there it is. We've had 5 of 6 candidates for you Elmwood-Transcona voters. Lots to think about. Please go to their websites. Of course, these interviews are 5 minutes long. You need more information about what they stand for. You can go to their individual sites as you get ready to cast your ballots. The vote coming up next week. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live on location at the Elm on Henderson Highway. Getting a little bit busy in here in the cafe. Right now, though, it's time to go to your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is overcast, 17 right now in Winnipeg. We are going to see some movement today with the wind. It's going to be gusting to 60 around noon today, and the temperature climbing all the way up to 29. The humidex today, 34. The number of homeless encampments is growing in Winnipeg and across Canada. And it's creating tension with some who live nearby, raising questions about whether the encampments are legal. CBC's Emily Brass looked into that question.
We're getting really tired.
Teresa Hunter lives near some encampments in downtown Winnipeg. She says the tenters are causing problems like fires, garbage, and aggressive behavior.
We are really pressing the city to do something. People need to have shelter and they need to be supported.
But from a legal standpoint, moving people out isn't so easy. Judges in other provinces have ruled the Charter of Rights and Freedoms includes rights to housing, even if that housing is an encampment. UBC lawyer Alex Flynn.
The court noted that sleeping is a basic human right that's essential for life, liberty, and security of the person.
Judges also found that right to life outweighs their neighbors' rights to use the parks for leisure and is also more important than local bylaws on things like sanitation and fires. A BC judge laid out criteria that has to be met before an eviction. Cities must show there's enough housing for all the people they want to evict and prove that housing meets their individual needs, such as being allowed to use drugs or have pets. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
For more on the legality of encampments, check out Emily's story and our video on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. A left-of-centre think tank is questioning $40 million worth of city grants and tax release to redevelop Portage Place Mall. The Manitoba director for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives says she's not sure people who live downtown will benefit. Some existing tenants in the mall like the idea of support for True North real estate development. Paul Hagerman works for a charity that uses office space in Portage Place.
On the one hand, I think the organization that owns the Winnipeg Jets probably has some deep pockets. And yet, if they are questioning the level of investment, I think it makes sense for governments to help them along a little bit.
City Council votes on the subsidies this month. A nonprofit turning a southwest Winnipeg home into an addiction center says it is willing to answer any questions from the public. Regenesis Center's plans for a temporary facility in Linden Woods will go ahead after a split vote in City Council. Dozens of people from that area sent letters saying they had not been properly consulted and they worry about safety. Executive Director Cindy Foster says Regenesis clients won't present any risks.
They have been mischaracterized and stigmatized, especially if they belong to the 2S LGBTQI plus community. We also service the BIPOC and disabled community as well. Our relatives deserve to be treated with respect and compassion as much as anybody else.
Foster says the center's 6 residents will have already gone through addictions treatment. Winnipeg police are asking for your help finding a missing 22-year-old man, Zayed Shamo, last seen Monday evening in Bridgewater. Police say Shamo was driving a black 2018 Honda Civic Touring with Manitoba plates LLN 113. Police are concerned for his well-being. He's described as 5'8", 185 pounds, medium build, brown hair, green eyes, and a beard. We do have his photo up on our website this morning. If you've seen him, call police. A former Manitoba teacher has been sentenced to 33 months after police found what a judge called horrific child pornography in his home. Alan Venice was sentenced for possessing child pornography a year after police found thousands of the images on his computer, phone, and USB drives. Court heard impact statements from 13 victims who were able to be identified through a process known as hash matching. Monique Saint-Germain at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection says it's simple but powerful technology.
It is like DNA, but it's for technology. It enables you to find like content. So it enables you to find where the same thing exists in another place.
Saint-Germain says the technology helps match newly found images to known ones where victims' identities are already known. And people forced to flee a growing wildfire near Bonabonabee Cree Nation have returned home. The Canadian Red Cross says the last group of evacuees flew back to the northern community Monday. Thousands had to leave their homes after wildfire reached the outskirts of the community last month. Stacey Robinson and her 3 young children were among the first to return.
I knew I was coming home to my house, to my home. Everything was okay. My kids would be coming home with me with nothing damaged. Made me feel kind of whole.
5 other First Nation communities in northern Manitoba were evacuated because of wildfires through the summer. The Red Cross says people from those communities have also since returned home. You can find more Manitoba news. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you to Heather Wells in our news department this morning.
Thank you.
And final look at the forecast and a bit of traffic if there is something to pass along, Abby.
Nothing in traffic, but it's going to be a windy and warm day. We have that air quality advisory in effect for central and northern Manitoba. Across the province, we're going to see sunny skies once this overcast clears off. 19 degrees for the northern territory, for the northern areas, and 29s down south.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Big thanks to everyone who joined our broadcast this morning. If you want to restore your faith in democracy, then come to one of these because you're going to see the candidates sitting, sharing breakfast together. We got pictures of them all, despite their different views. 6 people are running here in Elmwood-Transcona. It's now up to you, Elmwood-Transcona. Your by-election, of course, next week. Get out and vote on the 16th. If you want more information, you can go to election.ca. You can check it out online, elections.ca. Thanks to May McKillop. Thanks to Abby Adeyemi, Kevin Nipatebo, as well as Chloe Friesen, who's been on site here, Wendy Parker, who is our wonderful producer, and to our entire CA team. Big thanks to Elman Montoya. Thank you, Elman. Here at the Elm, which is our community studio today, as well as to the owner here, Myra DeBoon, also, and all the wonderful people here who've been in and out and chatting with us about politics, as well to the Chalmers Neighborhood Renewal Corporation for inviting CBC out to hear from voters because all those folks care so much about the neighborhood. Hopefully you'll join us on noon today. Our call-in today is about what you need to be more green in your community. There's a new initiative being announced today.